We'll bring this meeting for Peterborough City Council for December 9th, 2024 to order. The first item of business is our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we're on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga of the Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. The next item of business is 30 seconds of silent reflection. I'd ask those who are able to please stand and remove your hats for the singing of the national anthem. The Council for the City of Peterborough recognizes the principles contained in our Constitution and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Before we go to the approval of minutes, on behalf of Peterborough City Council and staff, I want to wish everyone in the community of Peterborough a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Happy Kwanzaa, and perhaps in the spirit of giving, if members of the community would consider giving a donation to Kawartha Food Share or the Salvation Army, I know they would be very appreciative to assist those who find themselves in difficult circumstances during this holiday season. Would someone like to move the approval of minutes of October 15, 2024? Councillor Vasiliadis, Councillor Heggie, will go to a vote. That is approved. Does any member of council have a declaration of pecuniary interest at this time? Not seeing any. We'll now go to registered delegations. Rodney Mera on the 2025 draft budget. Mr. Riro, if you could give us your name for the public record and of your address, you'll have 5 minutes. At the end of 4, we'll let you know that you have 1 minute left. Please proceed, sir.
Rodney Mirwald, 421 Sheridan Street, Peterborough. Will not release the apartment number. Thank you. What I'm here for is to speak about the fire department. Currently, I heard that they were supposed to be getting a new aerial truck coming in, and I went down there several times and looked at the trucks. I don't see anything wrong with the trucks, so I'm asking that they keep the current fire trucks for another year or two, and so on. And regarding the Peterborough policing, I've heard a speaker speaking up saying that he does not want the funding given to the Peterborough police about a certain matter. I don't know what his issue was, but I was against the speaker, and I think that the Peterborough police should be able to get whatever they're looking for. I'm not sure what the purpose was of new vehicles or their equipment or because of the move of the new location. But I support the move of the new location. I don't know if it's been done or not, But the only thing is, I do not support that the whole unit be put up there. If somebody calls in and say, well, can you come up and see us? And I have no way of getting up there, and it's going to be hard for me because I don't use the bus that much, and the buses are not always running on time. So I'm hoping that they do not move the whole station up to Lansdowne. But from what I was told by Stu, that it was only the human resources in the call center. So I would like to see that put in. The other thing is about the city transit. I would like to say that that we, I don't know why the cost is going up on the bus passing and so on. It's either the gas or because they're getting new buses or what. But people have DSO, which is Developmental Services Ontario, passporting, and I'm one of them. Speaking myself, I get 5,500 a month, or not a month, but per year. And if I'm paying right now $454 per year for my bus pass because it's $38 a month. So please, like, consider those that only get a certain amount per year that can only afford it. By the time they pay $600, they're only going to have like $3,000 left, which is not much. And they can't even pay for their activities, which is meant for. So I'm on developmental services. I've been on for over 3 years. I've been approved because of my disability. So I'm only allowed to play hockey and everything else, baseball, whatever, bowling or whatever. But it's not basically used for food or whatever. So, and I'm telling you right now that this cost, if it goes up to like $45 a month, it's going to be over 500 some odd dollars per year. So, some people were asking me about that as well. But that's all I know is that the bus passing needs to be reconsidered. I remember before it used to be $26 a month, then it went up to 38. So the more you guys increase it, these people on developmental services are going to be concerned. And regarding the discretionary benefits, I'd like to bring that up too. I applied for it about 2 weeks ago. I was approved, but I was not getting the full amount of what was required. So I never got a letter in the mail or a letter by email stating that they sent the payment to me. And for the past week or two, I've been constantly calling the worker there and asking where the check is, and I haven't received it. So regarding the discretionary benefits, they said I had mine in March or April. So because I had in March or April, they weren't after they received they wouldn't give me the full 55. So they said you have the choice either between 25 and 30. So I said, fine, give me whatever you can. So I waited 2 weeks, never got it. And I don't know who's in charge of that, but whoever's in charge of that, if the person's been approved, they should be at least by notifying by email or mail. I think it's a lot more professional. You know what I mean? And I'm thankful that I got the discretionary benefits. You know, the reason why I need it is because I have orthotics that I have to get every year or every 3 years, and I have to have proof from my doctor stating that I need them. So that was the other reason why I'm getting it. And thank you for bringing back the discretionary benefits because my trustee had to pay it about a year ago out of my own disability check, and I was really short on it. Like I had nothing left for 2 to 4 months because she had to make up the payment that I got. So please reconsider the thoughts of what I'm talking about with the fire hall. I don't know why they want the new fire hall. Leslie was saying that they something about an aerial truck that they wanted or something. So if it's nothing wrong with it, then I'm asking for them to keep it for another 2 years or another year, unless they really have to keep them, like, with the school bus companies. They tell you the school board has to only keep them for 5 years or whatever, 10 years. So if that's what their policy is, then I can see it. But if they're just doing it big, thank you. Thanks.
My name is Mark Bullock. I live at 884 Valley View Drive, Peterborough. At its December 2nd General Committee meeting, Council received the corporate sector and community sector greenhouse gas emission inventory and update reports. These reports indicated that Peterborough is on track to miss its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets by a significant margin. Both reports identified areas where further action is necessary if Peterborough is to fulfill the commitments it has made to GHG reduction. To move within striking distance of its target, according to the corporate sector report, the city should act to reduce emissions from municipal buildings and the vehicle fleet. According to the community sector report, the community sector target could be reached if residents carried out energy conservation measures in their own homes, adopted electric vehicles, and made more of their trips by public transit, cycling, and walking. The report states that municipalities can influence up to 50% of community emissions with policies and programs affecting land use, transportation, and waste management. The Peterborough Environmental Advisory Committee added its recommendation that the city pursue aggressive action on major emission categories such as transit and facilities. Council did not take the occasion of the reports to commit itself to any of these actions. This is regrettable. On the other hand, it is understandable that Council would be reluctant to commit itself in advance to projects which would involve significant financial expenditures or to regulatory changes which would affect a number of public and private interests. It is understandable, but it leaves unresolved a question. If the city cannot commit itself to additional climate actions now, what can it do now to ensure that such actions are taken when the time is right? What is needed is an implementation strategy, way of operationalizing climate action, one which will ensure that at critical moments, when significant decisions are being made, the climate gets its due, that no opportunity is missed to cut or minimize greenhouse gas emissions. One of the key components of any such implementation strategy is a climate lens. What I mean by a climate lens is a formal mechanism which consistently provides decision makers, that is, members of staff and members of council, with information about how any proposed project will contribute to GHG emissions and how climate change is likely to affect the viability of the project. To be effective, the climate change lens must be employed by all decision makers. Staff must employ the lens as it considers projects in the development stage, and very importantly, Council should employ it when it considers whether or not to approve any proposed project or measure. I want to be very clear. What I am suggesting is that just as Council sees in every report a section headed financial implications, so it should see in every report a section headed climate implications. This is in no way a radical or novel idea. The Clean Air Partnership, of which Peterborough is a member, has an online climate change tool. It is intended mainly for the use of municipal staffs, but the introduction to the tool suggests that the information it generates could regularly be set before councils. It states, municipalities have identified the need to bring climate change into all municipal decisions. One mechanism being advanced by municipalities to do so is bringing climate change implications into municipal council reports. Climate implications sections in the report speak to how these decisions affect climate, for example, GHG emissions, or how they get affected by climate, for example, vulnerabilities to extreme weather or flood risk. In the declaration of a climate emergency in 2019, Council instructed staff to report on opportunities to incorporate a climate change lens into all city actions and policies. A subsequent staff report recommended that the template for council reports be modified to include a section for comment on climate change initiatives. Many council decisions about budget, infrastructure, street design, waste disposal, transit, zoning, parking, and more will affect the city's greenhouse gas emissions, for better or for worse. Council should have, in every one of its reports, a clear statement about the climate implications of all proposals. That is, an effective climate lens.
Very much, Mr. Bullock. There could be some questions. Questions for Mr. Bullock? Councillor Duguay, please.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. Mark, thanks for your attendance. I do recall you and I discussed this very matter, and it would be with the understanding of council and my Councillor colleague Lachika, this could be something we'll review, particularly in our portfolio, with our commissioner and staff. So thank you.
Councillor LaChica, please.
Thank you very much, through you, Your Worship, to Mark. Thank you so much for your ongoing articulation of the priorities that are essential for us as a council and as a city to strive still more with concrete decision making on decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions. I look forward to hearing the recommendations from our alternative fuel report, from Climate Action Plan 2.0, and some of the discussions we had around fleet and end of life, and making decisions going forward on vehicles. So thank you. I think that some of these things will help inform those decisions, and we'll be vigilant to follow after the things that you're raising. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor LaChica. Any further questions for Mr. Bullock? Thanks very much, sir. Thank you. Next, we have a series of delegations, 10 of them, on 1400 Monacan Road, related to report IPG PL 24-003. The first person I will call is Patricia Bell. Bell, please. And if I could have your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Patricia Bell, 591 Holman Avenue. Good evening, council members. On September 23rd of this year, council passed a motion to designate the Martin House as a heritage property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, being of cultural heritage value or interest. It is important to consider that the designation did not apply to the interior of the property. This designation came at the recommendation of PACAC and was based on a heritage designation brief prepared by Eric Hansen, Culture Resource Program Manager. This was a motion about heritage designation and not a motion and vote about housing development, as some council members have elected. Housing development is a separate issue from heritage designation and should have had no part in a debate over the presented September motion, nor in the discussions at the general committee meetings, nor in tonight's council debate. A decision to grant heritage designation should be solely based on one factor, and that is, does the property meet the criteria as defined in the Ontario Heritage Act? A property is eligible for historical designation if it has physical, historical, associative, or contextual value and meets any two of the 9 criteria set out under Regulation 9/06 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The brief prepared by Mr. Hansen is 11 pages in length and provides extensive details. Read the multiple criteria, I believe 8 of 9, met by the Martin House to warrant historical designation and therefore preservation of an important piece of the history of Peterborough. To dismiss this brief is disrespectful to the work and expertise of Mr. Hansen and other city staff, as well as PACAC, which is mandated by the Ontario Heritage Act to provide recommendations to matters relating to heritage, including the designation of properties. A heritage designation for the exterior of the property does not prevent the development of the Martin House property, but it does prevent it and an important piece of Peterborough history from being demolished. I remind the council members who have turned this issue into one of housing development that the owner of the property was fully aware that the Martin House was on the list for heritage designation at the time of purchase, and therefore should have expected that a designation was indeed possible. It is my understanding that there were conversations between the owner of the property and some councillors about development plans. I question whether these councillors gave assurances to the owner that a heritage designation would not be supported by them and that the house could be demolished so that he could profit from the building of a multiple unit housing complex. Council has received a letter of objection and an architectural review of the notice of intent to designate the property. At the very least, these should have been provided to Mr. Hansen and PACAT for review and feedback to council as per the defeated motion from last week's general committee meeting. Council members are not the experts on historical designations, and they should be suspect of an architectural report from an out-of-city and perhaps out-of-province architect paid for by the developer. I would beseech council to abide by its earlier correct decision to grant a justly deserved historical designation to the Martin House. Again, your decision should be based solely on whether criteria are established as per the Ontario Heritage Act. In closing, I would remind council members, as they should certainly know, that many citizens of Peterborough have lost faith and trust in council over the demolition of Bottomworth Park, which is a short walk north from the Martin House. Please do not allow for the demolition of yet another neighborhood cherished landmark, but rather vote to preserve an important part of Peterborough's identity and character. If you choose to rescind the notice of heritage designation, I have 3 words: shame on you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Bell. And there will be some questions. Councillor Chico, please.
Hello, Patricia. Thank you for coming to delegate tonight. We hear your passion, and I wanted to ask you, as town ward councillor, as councillors that have been fielding many calls from concerned residents and homeowners in the Old West End. You've been how long have you lived in the Old West End?
Well, I grew up there from being a baby to age 12 on Hunter Street. And then as an adult, I've lived on Hunter, Weller, and now back on Homewood. So many years.
Thank you. And through you, if I may, your worship,
Please proceed.
just supplemental to that, in this time since May, since the idea of designation has come forward, since the Martin House has had some profile, in your discussions, because you would know the neighborhood quite well, what would you say is the temperature around the issue of the Martin House and the potential withdrawal of its intent to designate?
I'm sorry, am I to answer that through the chair or
Through the
Yeah,
chair, yes.
please. Thanks.
answering through the chair? Very upset. I've talked to a lot of neighbors, and a lot of them, as you can imagine, are uncomfortable speaking in public, as I appear to be. But they're very upset, and I know there's a lot of talk about it. This has been going, well, I first heard of rumors about what was happening back in, I guess, May of this year. That was the first I heard of anything that was going on. So there's been a lot of buzz in the neighborhood about it, and no one is happy about it.
Just one final thought, if I may, your worship. Would you characterize the folks that you've talked to and the concern as anti-development?
No, I wouldn't say anti-development. I would say anti-destruction, demolition of a heritage property.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Ms. Bell? Thank you very much for your presentation
Thank
this
you.
evening. The next presenter is Sarah Kerr via electronic means. Natalie, if we can cue that up, please.
Hello. Hello.
There you go, Sarah. It's Mayor Leal. You have 5 minutes to make a presentation on 1400 Monaghan Road. Please provide your name and address for the public record, and then you can proceed.
All right. My name is Sarah Kerr. I live at 560 Weller Street, Peterborough, Ontario, Canada.
Please proceed.
All right. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Honorable City Council members, Peterborough is a city with a rich history deeply tied into the Industrial Revolution and a legacy as one of Canada's first electrified cities. Known as the Electric City, Peterborough was home to General Electric Edison Co., which introduced the first DC power plant here to light our streets and power our streetcars. This historical significance shaped the city's character, particularly in the early 1900s, and created the timeless aesthetic that draws visitors and residents alike. Our historical charm doesn't just inspire pride, it brings tangible benefits. Visitors come to experience the small town feel, and production companies choose our region for movies and TV shows, contributing to local revenue and economic growth. This extends beyond Peterborough to surrounding communities like Millbrook, Port Hope, Coburg, and Lakefield. By preserving our heritage, we ensure that these cultural and economic benefits endure. Preservation doesn't mean halting progress. Instead, it offers opportunities for thoughtful adaptation by blending modern development with historical aesthetics. We can honor the past while meeting current needs. Consider these two examples. The condos over by the cemetery on Little Lake, which, despite their practicality, stand out negatively because they lack any connection to the local aesthetic. One of the better examples would be the downtown condo complex and retail space at Hunter and Elmer. They achieved modern goals while harmonizing with the local surroundings perfectly. So there's a great example right there. These examples show that development can succeed when it respects and complements the character of its environment. Regarding 1400 Monaghan Road, I propose a balanced solution. Adapt and preserve. So this property is significant in its design and historical connections. It's more than a building. It represents an era and a way of life. The home could be renovated into a multi-dwelling unit, addressing housing needs while maintaining its aesthetic. Additionally, the spacious property allows for further multi-dwelling units designed in harmony with the early 1900s architectural style. This approach would blend history with progress, preserving the cultural value while creating a practical solution for the community. Lifting the heritage designation would result in a loss, not just for Peterborough, but for future generations who deserve to see and understand their history's roots, or their city's roots. Unfortunately, we've seen such losses before. Example, the Stanley Adams Power Plant by Trent University. It was one of Canada's first power plants, built in 1893. It could have been restored as a functional plant and museum, attracting tourists and revenue. Instead, it was gutted and modernized. The London Street plant, though, still remains. It could potentially become an industrial attraction and a museum. Now, Peterborough has untapped opportunities in its tunnels, bomb shelters, and other historical sites. These could become unique attractions that celebrate our history and contribute to our economy. I believe in a future where progress and preservation go hand in hand. By valuing our history, we can create a city that honors its past while embracing its future. In closing, I urge the council to reconsider the removal of the heritage designation for 1400 Monaghan Road House to meet modern needs while preserving its historical and cultural significance. Thank you so much for your time and thoughtful consideration tonight, guys.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation. There could be some questions. Questions for Sarah.
Awesome.
Thanks very much again for your presentation. The next individual to make a presentation, Andre Metivier. Mr. Metivier, please. Mr. Metivier, if we have your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please proceed, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andre Metivier. I live at 195 Hunter Street East in Peterborough. There's a lot of passion in the room for this issue tonight. I want to commend you for your leadership and express my support for your ongoing advocacy for housing solutions in our city. As you consider the decision regarding the demolition of the property at the corner of Monaghan and Homewood, I urge you to prioritize the creation of homes over the preservation of a deteriorating structure. Having lived in the Old West End, including Hunter Street, Weller Street, and Gordon Avenue, and having owned a rental property in the area, I hold a deep appreciation for that community. I have friends in the Old West End, and I truly love the area. Yet, I'm acutely aware of the pressing need for housing in Peterborough. As a recent tenant myself, I envision the proposed building meeting the needs of many like me. Having recently moved into a new building in East City, I've experienced firsthand what such a community can be and become. A great place for retirees and young and not so young professionals alike. While the Monaghan and Homewood property may have once held beauty, it now represents a critical opportunity to provide suitable homes for families and individuals in our growing city. I trust the developer and city officials will collaborate to ensure that any new building suits the neighborhood and respects its aesthetics. Do not be afraid. After witnessing the state of the house's interior finish firsthand, I can confirm it's beyond repair. No responsible investor or individual would take on the extensive restoration that this house requires. It has surpassed any reasonable hope of redemption. As it stands, the property will continue to decline, negatively impacting surrounding property values. Without intervention, it could soon become another source of distress in the neighborhood. I recognize that some residents may have concerns about demolishing a house that has long been part of the community. However, true neighbors understand the significance of change and growth. Clinging to a crumbling structure at the expense of essential housing sends a troubling message about our city's priorities. Let's be honest, there are no valid arguments to oppose to this project other than I don't like it. While that's a legitimate sentiment, it's not a strong argument. We must adopt a progressive mindset that values development, enhancing our community as a whole. By supporting housing initiatives like this, we can cultivate a more inclusive and vibrant Peterborough. The housing crisis we hear about so frequently extends across all demographics, not just those who are economically disadvantaged. Importantly, while this development may not directly serve the lowest income bracket, it promotes upward mobility by freeing up more affordable units in the community. In light of these considerations, let us not allow NIMBYism to stand in the way of transformative progress. Development not only fulfills a crucial need, but also significantly boosts our tax base, attracting and retaining quality citizens who contribute positively to our city's core. Thank you for your commitment to improving our wonderful city. I look forward to your continued support for housing projects that will shape a brighter future for all of us in Peterborough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Metivier. There are some questions. I have Councillor Burke, Duguay, Lachika. Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Mayor Leo. Through you to Mr. Metivier. Have you seen the plans for the project?
I have seen rendering of what the outside would look like, yes.
Thank you. And then through the chair to Mr. Metivier, you mentioned that you've walked through the site. Can I ask how that came to happen?
I've seen pictures of the interior.
Okay. So you haven't walked through the site?
I've not.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duguay, please.
Thank you, Mayor Leo. As a follow-up to Councillor Burke's question, Mr. Metivier, and thank you for your attendance this evening. The pictures of the interior, do you know when those pictures were taken?
I do not have dates, no.
Okay, but you were provided photos that show the interior of a building, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So Lachika, please.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Metivier, thank you for coming to present.
Yeah.
You know, you're aware, though, that today, the delegations are to be not about development, but about the letter of objection based on the intent to designate. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that, and I think they go together.
Well, I think as when the previous the previous piece came forward back in September, it is entirely about the criteria and whether it's it should be designated. Would you say that any designation should be reconsidered? Any intent to designate, any listed designation should be reconsidered because of the housing crisis?
Mr. Metivier?
That any? No, probably not any, no.
Well, I'm wondering why, when something has been listed for a very long time and meets 7 out of 9 criteria for designation, why you would choose this particular property when we have many lots for sale, we have greenfield, we have vacant lots where there could be a 6-story, 55-unit dwelling constructed, bought, built. why you would choose this particular one in a neighborhood that has his historical significance to be the one that you choose to differ with.
Mr. Metivier, please.
Yes, I'm a partisan to that property. I love that property. I think it's a great property and I think it would be a great site for development. When I lived in that neighborhood and that house was for sale, I wanted to buy that house and develop it. Didn't have the money to do it. I think it's just crying for development.
Thank you. And if I may, just a supplemental, the term NIMBYism is used quite loosely and freely these days. And it's a leap, in my opinion, and
Okay.
to attach a judgment on a neighborhood and a community
It was my neighborhood and my community at some point.
But where do you live
I
now?
would just caution everybody, it's not an argument. Go ahead,
No,
Mr.
it's not an argument,
If you
but
have a question, ask
yeah,
the
my question is, where do you live now?
I live in the
Metivier,
city.
please.
Where in the city do you live?
I live in the new TVM condo in East City, new development, new building.
Okay, well, there are many West Enders who've lived there for a very long time and recognize the historical significance, and that it is a unique home, and there's only one like it. So there are plenty of places to build, and just my question is, would you reconsider using the word NIMBY to ascribe a character to the councillors who believe in heritage and the importance of preserving it, as well as the community and neighborhood that care about history and heritage as well?
Mr.
Have I
Metivier, please.
offended you tonight?
I'm asking, would you in the future be willing to reconsider the use of ascribing that term to people?
Mr. Metivier.
We can discuss the future when we're in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Councillor Riel, please.
Hello,
Oh, Mr. Metivier, don't run away. Couple more questions. Councillor Riel, please.
Apologies.
through the chair to Mr. Petivier. Might I be so bold to ask you what you do for a living?
I was a teacher in Peterborough for 32 years, and now I'm retired as a teacher, and I just started a new career as a mortgage agent.
The reason I asked the question, because you said the building was bond repair, so therefore you're neither an architect or a renovator, in previous or past life.
I have owned a construction and renovating business for 6 years in the past.
No, but I asked you, you said that you didn't go into the home. You looked at some pictures and you made a comment that it was beyond repair. You're neither an architect nor a developer or a renovator. True or not?
I was a renovator.
Thank you, Chair Beamer. Mr. Metivier, if I can put the question to you, sir, do you support this property being designated?
Not if it prevents it from being developed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Leal, for the opportunity. Mr. Metivier, I have a question for you through the chair, and it's about the conversation that's happened through previous speakers. And you said you're in the mortgage business. My question is, have you met or do you know or have a relationship with the developers, the J&J developers?
I have met J&J developers once 2 weeks ago over a beer through a friend.
Thank you very much.
We don't have any business relationship whatsoever.
Through the chair, would there be an opportunity in the future through your business, if there was condos and apartments on the site that you're advocating to be demolished, that there's a chance that you could be profiting off a project like this?
The developer is not offering mortgages. They're building condos.
Yeah, I think that through the chair, my questions come from all the conjecture around the conversation we're having, that we've had at council, where we've talked about plans that some people have seen. Even the speaker has seen the plans. The speakers met with the developers. Yeah, my question is just about if you could foresee yourself having any future connection to the development?
It's not my intent.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Mr. Metivier? Chris Shannon is next. Thank you, Mr. Metivier. Chris Shannon, please. Mr. Shannon, if we could have your name and address for the public record, and you have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, sir. My name is Chris Shannon. I live at 123 Maud Street. Mr. Mayor and councilors, I'm here today to voice my support for the development of 1400 Monaghan, the corner of Monaghan and Homewood. In the city that I've chosen to call home, there are a myriad of issues that require immediate attention, and housing, I feel, not being the least. Yet there is continued protest to protect a house that sits vacant, empty, and I'm not aware of it being occupied in a number of years. On my way to work on Friday, I heard over the radio that the United Way announced that vacancy is at 1% in our city. It is evident that this project, the development, would be a part of a solution, not a problem. When I first moved to Peterborough, I had the pleasure of being a renter in a large home divided into apartments on Weller Street. I would not have had the good fortune had someone not had vision to create housing for professionals who happened to have been renters.
Point of order. Talking about, not about a development. So I've sat here for 2 minutes and listened to you talk about a development. We're here to talk about a heritage designation, not a development. So
Mr. Shannon, if
either
you
the
can keep your,
person is going to talk about heritage designation, not a development.
Mr. Shannon, if you could just keep your remarks towards the designation, sir.
From my understanding, based on recent conversations here, the development is based on a lack of designation. Is that correct? So if it is delegated,
Point of order. There has, if I may, Your Worship, there has not been a planning application submitted in order for there to be a discussion about a development. This is entirely about a heritage designation. So we should not be discussing, it's out of order to be talking about the development that the speaker is referring to.
given this point, I would like to reinforce that I am not in favor of the designation because of what I had already stated. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Shannon? Questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Heath Finley, please. Mr. Finley. If we could have your name and address for the public record, you'll have 5 minutes to make your presentation, and we're talking specifically about the designation. Please proceed, sir.
And I will be. talking
Thank
about
you.
the Designation.
Your name and address for the public
Heath
record.
Finley, 585 Homewood, Peterborough, Ontario, and I directly across from the property that we're talking about.
Please proceed, sir.
I'm wondering if I could share with you, I've got some reference material that I'll speak to that I could share with the group.
Maybe we could ask the deputy clerk to distribute it first. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Leal, councilors and staff, my name's Heath Finley. I reside at 585 Homewood Avenue, directly across from the Monaghan Homewood property, which is under discussion today. I grew up in Kingston, lived and studied and worked in the UK, and then was fortunate enough to get a position as a librarian in Peterborough. I have roots in the Kawartha. My wife and I have raised 2 children here in this fantastic neighborhood. And we all feel fortunate to have lived in this special place. The 4 homes that I grew up in Kingston were all designated and are a part of the historic districts of Kingston. So I know a lot about heritage and designation. So I grew up with historic preservation and have observed how a combination of rules and respect for history, along with imagination and good design, have created livable neighborhoods. Over time, I've seen how it is possible to successfully combine the old and the new. So I've just handed out, you'll see some photos in what I've handed out, a fantastic example in Kingston, which is currently directly behind my parents' home. And it's just finishing construction. It's a 17-unit project, currently in its final stages on Wellington Street. It is made up of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units and is an excellent example of how a developer has valued the quality.
Excuse me, Your Worship, if I might, and I don't, meaning no disrespect to the speaker, Mr. Finley, but
Yes.
previous speakers were ruled that they couldn't speak about development.
Yeah.
The material that's been submitted to us.
Yeah, please.
If I might conclude, is speaking to, I would like to hear Mr. Finley's comments on the worthiness of designation.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please, Mr. Finley, we're trying to rein everybody in.
No, that makes
Point of order.
Yes, Councillor.
Just a point of order on the previous speaker, Councillor. The delegation is speaking to the merits of preserving the property by keeping the designation.
I hear your point of.
So that's the point that's being made, and there's nothing inappropriate about what's being shared.
I hear it very clearly. Mr. Finley, if we could just keep your comments as tight as possible under 1400 Monaghan Road, please.
Yep.
Please proceed.
I'll focus on the other D word.
That'd be
That'll
great.
design.
Thank you very much, sir.
No problem. So I'll just say that this building in Kingston was designated. And anyway, the scale of this project is, I think it is a great example of how a designated building can evolve. So the old West End between Monaghan and Park and between Weller and Sherbrooke has a unique and varied collection of high quality, well-built century homes, which create architectural rich streetscapes. Thus far, most later buildings have respected the scale of the existing residential homes, and it is this compatibility of scale which gives the neighborhood its sense of cohesiveness and harmony. The proposed development of the Martin House property, which I think people have already talked about, is totally out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood and will damage its special fabric. It would be by far,
sir, just try to keep it as narrow as possible.
Okay, by far the tallest building in the neighborhood. The corner will become a hotel-like structure with a large parking lot. And the reason I mentioned,
again, so you're talking about the development. Let's just stick to the designate, please.
so
we want to be consistent with everybody.
That's fair. Yeah. I will talk about the fact that this building is designated, which I wholly support. I was surprised that the developer had reached out to a neighbor of mine wanting to purchase his house in order to demolish it for a parking lot. This could be creeping demolition for parking up Homewood Avenue. So yes, this is a very family-oriented neighborhood. And I want to talk a bit more about designation. There are a couple of misconceptions about designation. One is that designation is just on the building, whereas it is on the property as a whole, unless there's exclusions. The other of that changes of the building or property cannot be made once it's designated is totally false. Designation means that the city has the opportunity of ensuring that changes to a designated property protect original parts of the structure and are in keeping with the context.
Your time's up, sir, but I'll give you a little bit of latitude here because we did interrupt you. If you just keep your remarks quite tight.
That's great. Thank you very much. So I think it is short-sighted and certainly not within the city or the neighborhood's best interest to forego the protection of which designation offers. Councillors should remember that their role is to care for the interests of the city, its neighborhoods, and its citizens, not the interest of a developer whose motivation is driven purely by profit. Designation would also provide the opportunity for the developer to consult with heritage professionals in Toronto and Kingston in order to have a successful heritage development. To reject designation without further exploration seems foolhardy. I believe it is important for my city council to protect the quality of this neighborhood. Designation is a tool that Ontario has under the Ontario Heritage Act to conserve our built heritage and our history. Under this act, councils have the responsibility to conserve our built heritage. Designation is about preserving Peterborough for the greater good. And as residents and citizens of Peterborough, I and my neighbors are asking you to do just that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Finley. There could be some
Thank you.
questions. Questions for Mr. Finley? Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. And through you to the speaker, thank you for coming. I'm really glad that you brought up the point about the beauty of the landscape, not just the structure of the house. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to that. I grew up in the neighborhood walking along that stepped wall that on Monaghan that led to the property.
Oh, yeah.
So is it important for a neighborhood like the Old West End to maintain the beauty of the landscape of the property? I know there's a bunch of beautiful old trees on the site. Does
Beautiful
that make a
trees.
difference?
Yeah, it's a lovely boulevard, sidewalks, and it's also a real mecca for families, right? And it's a really family-oriented neighborhood over generations. I've got 3 children on one side of my house and 3 children on the other. It is like that, and I think that any after designation, like once we have whatever happens to that property, I think that needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. And through the chair, thank you for the paperwork. And I believe that it does fall in line with what my question that I'm going to ask falls in line with the discussion. Because I guess some of the talk around the table is that by designating it, the property, that it would just be sitting there barren for the next however many years. I'm glad that you brought up the examples of, properties that have taken into heart the history of the site and developed in a sensitive way. As someone in the neighborhood, do you think that the neighborhood would be open if someone wanted to restore the house with the designation in a sensitive way?
Yes, I do think so. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor LaChica, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you to our delegate, thank you for coming today. And I've had some good conversations with folks this week regarding some of the themes that you're presenting, and it truly is something that we need to consider. Preserving designation is not anti-development. And I think that is the message that you're trying to convey. And it's about sensitivity. What you've shared, this is clearly a structure that designated here in Kingston that's very special. Being someone who lives in proximity and right across the street, contrary to what is written in the letter of objection, would you agree that this is a special property amongst other houses on Gilmore and Homewood? Thank you.
It is a landmark, and I know people who talked about driving up and down Monaghan have always seen it. It's a real anchor, I think, architecturally for the neighborhood. And to do anything that would alter that sort of role, I think, is really a huge detriment to the neighborhood.
Thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, yes, would you agree that our licensed heritage expert, renowned in Canada, the report that he wrote characterizes how special this home is? Thank you.
Yes, that is correct. I have full support for the work that Eric has done in that report. Yes, it does support that.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, Chris, thank you for coming tonight. And I apologize for, I'm sorry, Keith. I apologize for walking out. It was, what's that? Heath, I apologize again for getting your name wrong twice. I was looking at the wrong one. I apologize for walking out. I just needed a moment to myself. So I meant no disrespect to you at all. And thank you for coming out tonight and delegating.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Thank you
so much.
Sir Hickey, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And Mr. Finley, in your opinion, do you think a development of this magnitude would devalue the neighborhood?
So,
Finley, please.
when you're talking about when you're talking about magnitude and a development, are you talking about the 55 units? Possibly one bedroom, 2-bedroom unit? I think it would be, it is far too out of scale. It sounds more like a hotel than anything, and certainly it's not conducive to having families. I'm sure there's not any 3-bedroom apartments or units thought about for that particular place. So I think it's not an appropriate space for such a large development.
So do you think it will increase the value or decrease the value of the neighborhood?
Mr. Finley, please.
Are you talking financial or
Yes.
in terms of quality of life?
Financial.
Mr. Finley.
I think both financially and quality of life. I think some people will decide. I'll just say I remember real estate agents saying this is the most desirable street, Homewood Avenue in Peterborough. That's that person's perspective. I think that particular sentiment will go if we have that large development.
So I will take that as you figure it will devalue the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay.
In many.
So with that, I know that one of the claims that you just said about the developer was that they were in it for profit. If it devalues your property, is that not the same thing that you're worried about?
Mr. Finley.
The end value of the house or profit?
That's not my first thought, but certainly I've spent 24 years in this neighborhood. I've developed close relationships with people. I've many that I will call friends, and I think that will be devalued, and that's for me the most important priority there.
Okay, even though you did talk about the dollar and cents devaluation of it.
Well, I was asking you for clarification on.
And I
what
clarified
value-
and you answered.
I think we're fine
Thank
here,
you.
Councillor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Finley. Next person is Mr. Hammond, please. Mr. Hammond? Mr. Hammond, if I could have your name and address for the public record. You'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation, and please keep it defined to the designation on 1400 Monaghan Road. Please proceed, sir.
My name is Jay Hammond. I live at 492 McConnell Drive.
Please proceed.
I am a broker for Royal LePage Frank Real Estate, and I've been part of the local real estate board for 24 years. I oppose the property at 1400 Monaghan Road having a heritage designation. As a professional in the real estate industry in Peterborough, the property at 1400 Monaghan Road has been listed for sale 4 different times since 2016. And not one person, not one citizen stepped up to restore this property or do anything whatsoever with it at all until now. I believe the reason is its in current state of disrepair. And it just doesn't make economical sense to do so.
Point of
I've
order.
been witness to this.
Through you, your worship, the heritage designation is based on the exterior of the building and does not have to do with its state of repair in any portion of the building. And if the delegate could speak to the designation, that would be appreciated so that it is germane to our discussion.
Thanks very much.
Point of order. Can we just let these people speak?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a delegation, it's council. They can come out and say what they want. We should give people some sort of latitude.
I
I think.
appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
If we're not going to keep going around the table, Mr. Hammond, if you could keep your remarks defined as closely as you can to the 1400 Monaghan Road designation. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. I was getting to my point.
I thought maybe you were. Please proceed.
I've been witness to this property's demise over the last 8 years. I have viewed the property countless times. Unfortunately, this property has been abused and neglected by the previous owner. It was left vacant and has flooded from the second floor bathroom straight to the basement, destroying the bathroom, the kitchen, all the woodworking, the trim, the moldings, the hardwood flooring, the dining room, the plaster moldings, the built-in cabinets, the hardwood flooring, and collapsed the entire basement ceiling. The natural gas was turned off and the property was not winterized properly, allowing the boiler system to freeze, exploding the radiators on all levels in different areas of the home, causing damage that no one would want to take on to repair. The outside, as you know, as you can drive by, and if you actually stop and walk the property, the outside is in just as disrepair as the inside. The eaves, the fascia, the soffit have all been let go, windows broken, doors broken, fences, decks, pools unopened for years on end. In my professional opinion, this is a true eyesore on our community. With no cooking source, and most notably no primary source of heating, this property is not only uninhabitable currently, but is also unmortgageable by most mainstream financial institutions. I believe that placing a designation on this property would only prohibit the progression of our city. This property is in major disrepair and is uninhabitable. The heritage designation is not wanted by the current owners, and placing an unwanted heritage designation on this property will prohibit any future development and stop progress and profitability in our community, of which we so desperately need. And that is why I'm opposing this. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, Your Worship, the previous councillor, the tone and the remark was disparaging, and I have concerns about that. Thank you. But thank you. My question, thank you for your perspective. This is a deep discussion we're having today and an important one. So all perspectives need to be heard and assessed. My elbow partner and myself have had many discussions in the last couple of weeks with someone who's interested in purchasing this property and restoring it to its glory. So to say that there is nobody that would be interested, I think is an assumption.
Nobody was interested in previous listings in the past 8 years.
And my question is, there were comments that hazmat suits needed to be worn. There's been a variety of things expressed about the state of the interior. Did you have to wear a hazmat suit to enter the house?
I did wear PEP, absolutely. I did wear PEP equipment, absolutely.
Okay. And are you aware that the interior of a home, if it has water damage or plumbing, is not a criteria for whether to designate a home, according to the Ontario Heritage Act? Are you aware of that?
I am aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Welcome, Mr. Hamilton. If we could have your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm Stuart Hamilton, the chair of PACAC. 2024 represents my 15th year as a member of the committee, 14 years as committee chair. The address of record is 661 Park Street North. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, members of city staff. Earlier today, I sent a letter to the clerk's office to distribute to members of council. I will read that into the record after I've made a few comments regarding the designation of interior details and the property in question, 1400 Monaghan Road. Over the last several years, I can only recall one previous building in which city staff and PACAC recommended interior details be included for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. The main reasons for this is that generally homes in excess of 100 to 150 years of age often have had multiple owners and also undergone some form of interior modification. So often a lot of the home's interior original details are lost. For the last property in which details were included in the designation, the home had been in the same family for a very long period of time. Overall, it was in amazing condition,
with some spectacular interior period features. The longtime owners of the home were very much in favor of adding some of those interior details to the designation. It was approved by council at the time. For 1400 Monaghan Road, it has been mentioned several times about some interior damage due to neglect and possible water damage. But without a thorough engineering report from an impartial party stating otherwise, we can only assume that the damage that is present is completely repairable. As for water damage, there are many of us here tonight that will remember the Peterborough flood of 2004 from 20 years ago. Many people suffered terrible water damage with basements and lower levels submerged. But as I recall, the homes were repaired and damages mitigated. I'm going to read from my letter now. As chair of PACAC, the committee appointed by council to advise matters pursuant to the Ontario Heritage Act, I feel obliged to send this letter with some thoughts to consider when reviewing the report to designate 1400 Monaghan Road. Members of PACAC are interviewed and approved by City Council. All the committee members except one are serving in a reappointment term. This is a knowledgeable, experienced, and dedicated group of volunteers. As a committee of council, PACAC has been advising City Council on matters pursuant to the Ontario Heritage Act for almost 50 years. Regarding concerns about the state of the interior of the building, it is important to note that PACAC did not receive or review any third-party engineering reports that deem the building structurally unsound. Upon checking with staff, they confirmed none has been submitted. When reviewing the ERA report supplied by the building owner, I was surprised by many of the points raised by the writer. And based on my experience, I would generally not agree with the report. But I do believe most municipalities rely upon their own engineers, planning experts, financial and legal staff when contemplating decisions that will have a lasting impact upon the community. As their impartial recommendations provide a clear direction that has the best outcome. This is what I'm asking Council to consider this evening, to move forward with designation. The report put forward by ERA on behalf of the property owner and the report supplied by staff and approved by PACAC are remarkably different. If the building designation was approved this evening, the owner could appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT. The OLT would engage other heritage professionals that could review the facts and reports as provided and make an informed, impartial decision. The provincial government has set up the OLT to hear these types of appeals. I am not a heritage professional. There is only one at City Hall, one in the building, one with the City of Peterborough. They advise City Council, engineering, planning, and legal departments. Their depth of experience and knowledge in the field is outstanding. But it's also important to note the benefits of the matter going to the OLT. It allows the City of Peterborough to negotiate with the property owner about the project, specific terms, designs, and plans. This could mean that future developments that add needed density are suitable for the existing historic residential neighborhood and complement the surroundings. Heritage preservation is also about adaptive reuse and intensification.
Stuart, if you could sum up quickly, please.
No, that's it, Your Worship, so I'm available for any questions at this time.
Thanks very much, and there will be some questions. Councillor Burke, please.
Thanks, Mayor Leo and Stuart. I want to thank you for staying acutely on topic and acutely basing your comments on the objection report that all of council has that we're discussing tonight. My question to you is that if the objection goes through, the objection to the designation, could the neighborhood take the case to the OLT and fight the decision?
I don't believe they can. I'm probably not the best person to ask on this matter, but I don't believe they can. I think if council doesn't approve the designation tonight, then that opens the way for the developer to move forward with whatever plans he sees fit.
Thanks, Stuart. And then in your opinion, through the chair, if the designation went through and the outside of the building was designated as a heritage building, is there still a way that the current owner could work to upgrade the building and expand upon it, given the designation?
Stuart, please.
Yes, through you, Worship. Oh, absolutely, Councillor Burke. There would be many ways. And again, once the building was designated, it is a large property. There would be many ways. I would suppose that additional outbuildings could be added to support further units, as well as changes within the building. And if possible, one could even look at additions to the existing building that could add units. I would think there's a lot of possibilities. And again, designation won't prevent any type of intensification or adaptive reuse, but it will allow the city to be involved in all the planning. But without designation, we lose that ability.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Mr. Hamilton? Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for all your dedicated years of service to PACAC. The community really appreciate it. Have a good evening, Stuart.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Next is Peter Harris. Mr. Harris, please. And if we could have your name and address for the public record, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation on the designation of 1400 Monaghan Road. Please proceed, sir.
Before I get started, I'm just a little bit concerned about the way the night has evolved. I'd like to point out to council that much of the problems that have been created here with people mentioning development, not our problem. That's been council. That's been council in a very undisciplined way, raising all these issues, 55 units, all of these things have been raised without an official plan. So, if we're having conflict this evening, it's you guys. And that's primarily what I wish to speak to tonight. If I may I?
You have to make a delegation on 1400 Monaghan Road, the delegation. Please proceed, sir. On the delegation.
Okay.
And could we have your name and address for the public?
Sure, but a second thing, please. Dr. Tom Miller, in the way that doctors do, very last minute, asked me if he could take some of my time. So I would like to surrender my last 2 minutes to him, if that's possible. He is a registered delegate.
Sure. Oh, no, he's not a registered delegate. No, he's not on the list.
He attempted to be, and he was too late.
We have a limit of 10. You have the floor.
Okay.
Your name and address for the public record. Please proceed.
Peter Harris, 549 Homewood Avenue. I would like to talk to council about process this evening. I've been appalled by council's conduct in the designation proceedings for Martin House. I agree with both councillors Duguay and Beamer. Council needs to overhaul the manner in which designations occur. Moreover, I believe that this process has been so fraught that council cannot make an informed and impartial decision. Your constituents want what's fair. I have looked extensively for evidence of J&J Development's activities on the internet. I have found none. No website, nothing. When I asked councillors and planning department if J&J...
Mr. Harris, just keep it to 1400.
I'm getting there.
It's not about J&J and whether you can find them on a website or not. 1400 Monaghan Road, the topic is the designation. Yay or nay?
The point is that you're going to be handing the keys to this house to J&J Developments, and you're going to allow him to demolish it.
Please.
And I question whether they're the right developer to be allowed to do that.
Okay. Just keep your remarks confined to the designation, please, sir.
The point is that J&J does not have a portfolio of developments. I've asked council members if they have one. I've asked the planning department if they have one. They do not. And my point here is that City Council should have learned from Baskin and Robbins, the Canadian Malt Factory, and most notably St. Paul's Church. Council must realize that they cannot take a risk and allow this house to be demolished and sit empty. Bordering Martin House is a home owned by a gentleman in his 90s. This vulnerable senior has been approached twice by J&J to ask if he would sell his property to create space for a parking lot. I would accept one visit from J&J. A second visit, in my opinion, has crossed boundaries.
The neighbor's property is not in question here. It's strictly 1400 Monaghan Road.
Multiple councillors and the mayor have been quoted in the press and posted comments on social media regarding the condition of the interior of Martin House, with the most recent being a social media posting on Friday. But council has been told on several occasions that the designation was for the external structure, not the internal structure. Why then would councillors discuss the interior condition of the house when designation would still allow Mr. Martin or Mr. Cooper to gut the structure? Is council trying to mislead the public? The following is a direct quote from a councillor taken September 23rd from council. We were told, because of the condition of the home, the black mold, the asbestos, the dangerous aspects to the decking, and a lot of the damage that had been done to the interior home, that it was not safe for us to go inside. In fact, it was in fact dangerous and a liability to the owner to allow us to go in. I take the man at his word and still have not seen the inside of the house. However, on Friday of this week, a councillor posted on social media that he had been allowed inside the house by the developer. And, of course, the councillor called it a total disaster. For the record, I have images from the last listing, October of 2023, on a slideshow. I can make them available to any councillor if they wish. I'm not intending to embarrass anyone, but I'm sorry. After 3 votes, councillors should have an idea of what they are voting on. They are voting on designating the exterior of Martin House. The condition of the interior is irrelevant to that decision. In addition to the above, I would like to register my disappointment over City Hall's retention of J&J's notice of objection to designation. This political trick ensured that opposition to J&J's objection would be stifled. It is the kind of politics that angered so many of your constituents in the Bonnerworth Park redevelopment. It reflects poorly on City Hall and Council. Finally, I've been astonished over what has been said publicly regarding future development plans in the site. In the context of designation hearings, councillors have been very—
Your time's up, sir, but I'll give you a moment to, I'll give you a moment to finish your thought there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Councillors have been very public about the number of stories in this building, the number of units, that it will have affordable units, and that it will serve seniors who want to age in place. But councillors, none of this has been approved. We're not even past the pre-planning stage. In council meetings and outside, I've heard councillors go so far as to calculate the development fees that this building would yield, and councillors even asked staff to calculate the tax yield on this 6-story building. This in the context of a designation hearing, and this without an approved preliminary plan. Whether or not it's been intentional, the designation of Martin House has been fraught with questionable behavior and misleading information. This has not been a fair process. It has not been fair to Martin House. It has not been fair to neighbors.
Could you just wind it up?
I'm winding it up.
Okay.
I believe that the only just outcome is for council to designate the house. J&J, if it chooses, can challenge this decision before the Ontario Land Tribunal. A process that would be impartial would assure your constituents that the decision was made without questionable behavior. We want fair.
Thank you very much, sir. There may be some questions. Questions for Mr. Harris. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Your worship, I don't have a direct question for the speaker, but the speaker's comments have some questions based on what he said for staff, so I'll have to wait for that. But
yes,
I want to thank the speaker for coming this evening and raising his points.
Yep. Any questions for Mr. Harris? Thank you very much, sir. The next presenter is Bernardo Bezjak. I apologize if I pronounced it wrong. Oh, thank you. If you could give your name and address for the public record, and you'll have 5 minutes, sir. Please proceed.
Bernardo Bezjak. I'm afraid to give my address. It's 610 Sherbrooke Street. I don't have any financial interest. I don't know the owner of the property, but I did a little research, and I love this area. And I grew up in Hyde Park in Toronto, just to give you a little reflection on that. This house here, I don't think it's fair to the buyer that it be designated a heritage. For the simple reason being is that it's absolutely, sir. Absolutely. So there's 131 houses that encompass the area between the north side of Weller to the south side of Homewood, right over to including Walton and Belmont Streets. There's 131 homes. This particular property was built between 1930 and 1931. Not even 100 years old. So when I hear people submitting that it's a century home, I like the property because it looks very impressive, but it's a white elephant compared to what was built and what is currently there. There's far greater, more beautiful properties that should be designated as heritage homes, but not this one. This is a Spanish colonial revival style home, completely out of context of what the area actually has in there. Out of the 131 homes in there, there's 3 homes that are built between 1841 and 1860. 13 homes from 1861 to 1880. 27 homes between 1881 and 1900. 50 homes between 1901 to 1920, leaving 22 homes that fall within the perimeter of this subject property. I don't understand why they're choosing to do this a designation when there's approximately 160 homes that could be far greater historical importance than this property. I think that the money that suggests land use tribunal that this gentleman has to go, there's probably $400,000 or $500,000. I think that something more equitable can be done by saving that money, that he can maybe do a facade on whatever he wants to build, because nothing's been approved. 6 stories, 5 stories, 3 stories, but it will be an impact on the downtown core of Peterborough. If you have a seniors residence, for instance, they could walk downtown and support the businesses that are dying. He could do a nice facade to replicate, perhaps, the house that's sitting there now. That house would need a $2 million reno to live in it. When somebody says home, a home is something that you can habitate, like live in it. This is not livable. You know, I just don't, I seem like what's occurred to the buyer is a little underhanded. He bought it and then wants to have it designated. The only value to this property is the land. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much,
Any questions, Dory?
Mr. Bezek. And there could be some questions. Councillor Burke, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Leo. Through you to Mr. Bezjak. It sounded like you have some experience in real estate.
About 60 years, 52 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anything further? Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure.
I'll next ask for Aaron Walpole to come forward, please. Aaron? Aaron, if we could have your name and address for the public record. You'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Please proceed, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Aaron Walpole. I live at 608 Walkerfield Avenue, across the street from the Martin House. I have lived in Town Ward for 20 years and on Walkerfield Avenue since 2012. I have a young family with 2 kids. My wife and I have always been attracted to the Old West End and finally chose to lay down roots, largely because of the historic quality of the neighborhood. My neighborhood is a close-knit community with strong friendships, regular gatherings, neighbors helping neighbors, and everyone looking out for one another. I'm speaking today to express my concerns and opposition to the council's recent vote to withdraw the notice to designate 1400 Monaghan Road, the Martin House, as a property with cultural heritage value, a property that clearly meets numerous criteria provided in regulation under Ontario's Heritage Act. I was very upset to read the objection report submitted by the Calgary-based planner, which attempted to dispute the Martin House's qualities with regards to these criteria. The report clearly lacks local context and perspective and conveniently ignores the fact that regulations under the Heritage Act only require property to meet one of the criteria for designation as a cultural heritage value. The regulation does not require the property to meet all criteria. Furthermore, the regulations do not provide out-of-province planners with the authority to make this designation. Rather, the authority to designate lies with the municipal council. I would argue that the perspectives and values of the local community who elected that council should be priority consideration in this decision-making process, not a bought and paid for planner from out of province. Initially, I was going to take this opportunity to describe how I think the Martin House satisfies most of the 9 criteria for designating a cultural heritage value. But I've decided not to do that because I'm not an architect, and because the Peterborough Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee has already completed this analysis and recommended the house for designation.
Most importantly, however, this council has already acknowledged that the Martin House meets the criteria in the council's recent vote on September 23rd. I will share that from the vantage of my front porch and from my regular walks through my neighborhood, that the Martin House clearly stands apart and above the neighboring beautiful century homes with its unique style and craftsmanship. Both the builder of the Martin House, Mr. Henry Thomas Hickey, and the original owner, Mr. Herbert Martin, were people of significance to our city's history. Mr. Hickey was involved in the development of more than 100 buildings and structures throughout the city, including the beautiful and important Hunter Street Bridge. Mr. Martin was an innovator and important historic entrepreneur to our local industry. Several of the heritage criteria are framed in the context of the local community or area. This is something the Calgary-based planner failed to consider in their objection report. The Martin House exemplifies the character of the Old West End. Our neighborhood is composed almost entirely of old historic buildings, the most significant being the Martin House. My wife and I chose to live in this neighborhood because of this rich history. The Martin House stands out as a landmark and features the historic qualities of the Old West End. If we ignore this value, remove designation, and accept inevitable demolition, we will be permanently eroding the heritage value of our community. If this council decides that the Martin House does not satisfy the criteria for designation as a cultural heritage value, then I fear that no structure in this city can come close to meeting such a high and unrealistic benchmark. Peterborough is lagging behind our city neighbors in our recognition of heritage values. Kingston, for example, is on the cusp of designating over 70 properties this year alone, whereas Peterborough has approved a mere 4 since COVID. I recognize that underlying the current issue of respecting the heritage value of the Martin House is the need to provide much needed housing in our city. I'm deeply concerned about the housing crisis in our city, our province, and across the country. However, a heritage designation does not negate development on the property to support housing needs, nor does it prevent the landowner from demolition down the road, if indeed the building is truly beyond the state of repair. By designating the property as a heritage value, we can help provide rigor and more transparency for the community in the fate of this property. In its strategic plan, the City of Peterborough boasts a vision that Peterborough is a place that respects its past, heritage, and culture. We should embrace this vision and recognize the cultural heritage value of the Martin House. We do future generations an injustice if we devalue cultural and heritage features in our community. It's what makes our city special and enriches our community. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Walpole. There could be some questions for you, sir. Questions? Questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will now move on to consent items on the agenda. Anybody wants to speak to 10A? 10A? 11A? 11A? 11B? 11C? 11C? 11D? D? 11E? 11E? Did, oh, okay. 11F? 11G? 11H? 11I? 11J? 11J? 11K? 11L? Oh, I got K. K circle. 11L? 11L? 11M? M? L? No, okay. 11M, Councillor Chica? No? Okay. 11N, N, okay. 11O? 11O? It's already been circled to be, Councillor Burke put his hand up. Okay, we got it. And Councillor Crowley did too. 3 of you went up in a row. 11O? 11O? 11P? So if I could have someone move 10A, 11A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, L, M, O, and P. Councillor Crowley, Councillor Vasiliadis, comments or questions? We'll go to a vote. And those are carried. 11J, 11J? Councillor Real. You're moving it, and do you have a seconder? Okay.
Through the chair, certainly, I've given a lot of thought to this here, and certainly, I've been an advocate ever since I've been on council of equal pay for equal work. I think that in 14 years, we've come from about a councillor making roughly $10,000 or $11,000 a year to what we are receiving now. This new portfolio system and certainly realignment certainly has increased my workload exponentially. And part of the reason I think or the mayor's reasoning for doing this was to even out the playing field and to give people the opportunity maybe to do some of the portfolios and the jobs, but also to even out the playing field, the workload. And I don't see that happening with the realignment here. I understand that there's some people on council that have full-time jobs. I understand on council that there's some people that have businesses. And I also understand that some of us are retired. I also understand that probably the mayor, in his wisdom, took into consideration the skills and ability of councillors in giving him the portfolio or the portfolios that he wanted them to. But in consideration of doing that, one of the things I see that has failed is the compensation part of it. If there's councillors that do not wish to because of either their workload in their private life and certainly the businesses, then the other one, some of us shouldn't be disadvantaged because of that. The other two issues I have is that the change, the realignment of community services, social services, and homelessness is absolutely the wrong move to separate the two. Both Councillor Burke and I attended a conference in Ottawa. There was 2,000 people there, and social services and homeless and housing are joined at the hip. Most of the people that you're dealing with in social services, they're on OW or ODSP, and certainly I feel that there's a disconnect here with the separation of that. The other one I was given, and part of my portfolio is transit. We've had a banner year of sorts. We have an increase of 28% in ridership in transit. And I certainly, not because I chaired the transit liaison committee, but there are some really good people on there. And I feel that the change of taking the councillor off, which is myself, off of that committee is not serving that committee well. And certainly all of you received a letter from the transit liaison committee speaking to that point of the need for a councillor on that. Even though that I'm able to attend the meetings because I have the transit portfolio, certainly I have been chair of that committee, and certainly I look forward to the meetings, but I look forward also to how transit is going to be moved forward as part of our climate change and certainly our transportation master plan. So on that, I will not be supporting it because of those things. One is the compensation. The other one is the removal of myself off of community services or disjointing community services from housing and homeless, and then the transit committee and certainly the accompanying letter. So I cannot support the mayor's recommendation on the changes to the portfolio system.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hill. If I could just get somebody to move, Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Duguay, further comments or questions? We'll go to a vote. And that is carried 8-3. The next item is 11K. Councillor Beamer, please.
Thank you, Mayor Lil. I'll move it if I could just add an amendment to it.
We'll deal with the amendment first.
That,
Moving the amendment.
yep, main motions. I'll move
Okay,
the main
move the
motion
main
and the
motion.
amendment. Yep.
And a seconder, Councillor Hakey. Go ahead, Councillor Beamer.
So the amendment is simply that Mr. Lewis O'Brien be reappointed to the Kofi board for a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2027. Just quickly, Mayor Leal, Mr. O'Brien has served for 6 years on the board, 2 terms, and has 1 remaining term before his maximum tenure of tenure limit of 9 years is reached. So that's the amendment.
Thanks very much, Councillor Beamer. Councillor Rial, please.
To the chair, certainly as a former board member of Kofi, and I know Mr. O'Brien quite well, a good board member, and certainly my comments are certainly nothing indicative of the work of the councillors. I can't support the appointments to the Kofi board, the other 2 individuals, and certainly Mr. O'Brien, because my objection to the board is not to is not a personal decision. I believe that these are fine people. My objection is that I believe City Council should become the Kofi board. Kofi board consists of power generation, PUC, and IT. If City Council became the board, there is no need to break up the group of companies and save the taxpayers millions of dollars. You accomplish what you will or what you want to by bringing it in-house and the control. 5 members of council presently sit on the PUC board, and 3 of us have presently 2 that are on the board, and myself have Kofi. We have Kofi. We've all sat on the Kofi board. Therefore, I said my comments are absolutely nothing to do with the 2 candidates that are coming forward. And Mr. O'Brien, I just think this is not in the best interest of the city of Peterborough, and could be cost savings. And certainly, council should become, like I said, I'm repeating myself, council should become the Kofi board, and it's going to save the taxpayers millions of dollars.
Thank you, Councillor Rial. Any further questions on this? We'll go to a vote. On the amendment first. And the amendment's carried, and the main motion was also moved by Councillor Beamer and Councillor Hickey. Comments or questions on that? Councillor Parnell, Jesse, your hand up. Okay. Any further comments or questions? We'll go to a vote. That is carried. 11 in. Councillor Burke, please. Then Councillor Vasiliadis. And then Councillor Crowley. Councillor Burke, then Councillor Crowley. 11 in, please. And then LaChica. Councillor Burke, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to the support of the recommendation to designate 1400 Monaghan Road, also known as the Martin House, as a heritage property under the Ontario Heritage Act. This decision represents a critical step in preserving the cultural and historical fabric of our city, ensuring that future generations can appreciate this property the same way a lot of us around the table have. The Peterborough Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, PACAC, has carefully reviewed the designation and provided a comprehensive evaluation of the property's cultural heritage value.
I'll give you your time back, Councilor. We got to get the motion on the floor.
Yeah, I moved
So
it.
it's moved by Councilor Hanky and seconded by Councilor Crowley. I guess Councilor Bieber. Okay, you got the floor.
Yes, so the Peterborough Architectural Conservation Advisory Committee, PACAC, has carefully reviewed this designation and provided a comprehensive evaluation of the property's cultural heritage value. Their report highlights the Martin House's architectural, historical, and contextual significance, underscoring why this designation is essential. Architecturally, the house is a beautiful piece of craftsmanship built in 1928 by the skilled builder Henry T. Hickey. Its unique combination of Tudor Revival and arts and crafts elements are a striking example of period design, showcasing the artistry and meticulous attention to detail that define this era. This is not just a home, it is a visual narrative of creativity and innovation, a reminder of the beauty of architecture and landscape that architecture and landscape can bring to our communities. Historically, the house stands as a testament to the achievements of Herbert S. Martin, a local entrepreneur who played a pivotal role in the development of the corrugated container industry. His work brought economic growth and opportunity to Peterborough, and the Martin House reflects his contributions to our community's industrial and entrepreneurial legacy. Contextually, the property is an integral part of the Old West End neighborhood, which represents the ideals of suburban development during the interwar period. The Martin House is a symbol of this transformative time, connecting our present community with the aspirations and values of the past. The preservation not only honors this history, but it enriches the character of the neighborhood, providing continuity and a sense of place. It's important to address concerns that have been raised regarding to the potential impact of this designation on future development. Let me be clear, designation does not stop development. It is about merging and managing change. Adaptive reuse offers an exciting opportunity to integrate historical elements into new innovative designs that serve modern needs while preserving our past. Across Ontario, we have seen numerous projects that incorporate historical properties into modern designs. We do not want to become a cookie cutter city. We have heard from our local medical community on this matter. The character we are preserving is the very thing that will draw people to our city. It will draw the doctors to the city that we so desperately need. There's been not much talk around this table about branding the city. It is hard to brand something that has a lack of character. I must also address a troubling matter. It's the way that the developers with a vested interest in this property have approached councillors individually in an attempt to secure votes against this designation. There is talk in the newspaper about the project being affordable. We have heard councillors that have walked through the house. This does not create a level playing field, and this is not how decisions about public interest should be made. As representatives of the community, we have a duty to act in the broader public interest. Declining this designation would set a dangerous precedent, signaling that our cultural and historical assets can be easily sacrificed. PACAC and our city staff have made it clear. The Martin House meets the criteria for designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. Tonight's decision is about more than preserving a building. It's about preserving our community's identity, its stories, and the values that have shaped it. By designating the Martin House, we reaffirm our commitment to protecting the character and heritage of Peterborough for generations to come. I urge my colleagues around the table to make the right decision and to vote against this objection and to stick to our original designation of this property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not one for pontificating, so I don't know if I'll use my whole 5 minutes or not. So this is sort of new for me.
Order.
So
Was that
no, it wasn't directed at you,
I
Councillor.
haven't made my point yet, so I don't know.
Fair.
My point is that I just made a lengthy delegation on a subject that's important to me and important to the community I represent. And then a comment was made about a reminder about the time. And then, oh, I apologize. Yeah. And my, through you, Chair, my comment about pontificating was not about you. It's about me because I don't talk very much in chambers. So thank you so much, sir. So I think I owe everybody in the room, especially the people who came here from Homewood to delegate tonight. I owe you an explanation for why I voted the way I did. And I have received so much vitriol from other council members and the community that I think that I have to say something. And I absolutely owe it to you to say something. This job that we do here on council, we don't get paid very much to do it, and we go through a lot to do it. And the last thing that we need to do is suffer the slings and arrows of other council members to do it. So I apologize first off to Councillor LaChica for my tone. It was not meant as disparaging to you at all. The town ward councillors, I think, have acted admirably in defense of this property. However, it does seem like even though there's 5 other members of council who voted with me last week, I am the one that's being singled out for this. And I'm the one that has to bear this burden. So if I have to bear it, then I will bear it. I will bear the weight of it because we do a job here.
Point of order. We're talking about a designation.
Absolutely. And I'm explaining why I voted the way I did.
You can explain your position.
If I am trying
I will challenge the chair. Because he has not said one thing about designation. He's talking about his personal problems. And if you have a problem, go to the integrity commissioner or with any counselor. But talk about designation. Point, I'm challenging you.
Thank you, sir.
And you have to go to council to vote. I'm challenging the chair to rule. And on that, everything stops. You have to go to a vote to council that what I'm challenging you on is this person here. This councillor should be talking about the designation of 1400 Monaghan Road.
Let's have a vote to sustain the chair. We'll go to that right now, and then we'll proceed. Mr. Clerk, can you explain?
Sure. Thanks, Your Worship. Just while my colleague loads the vote, there's been a challenge of the chair. The motion will read to the effect that the ruling of the chair be upheld. Therefore, if you are in support of the chair's ruling, you will vote in the affirmative. And if you're not, you'll vote in the negative.
So, sorry, just a point of clarification. So, and what does that mean? That means I get to speak? All right, fair. Thank you, sir.
And the chair's been sustained. Councillor Crowley, proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So, like I was saying, I owe it to the people who are here to explain why I voted the way I did, and I will explain why I voted the way I did. I have loved 1400 Monaghan since I was a child. I've lived here all my life, and I remember being in the back seat of my parents' car, face pressed up against the glass as we would drive by, and I always thought, wow, that looks like the house on Dallas. I loved that house, and I love that house still. My vote in September I voted with my heart. I voted as that 8-year-old boy driving by the house. This vote that I made last Monday, I took the emotion out of it. The report that we got last Monday deserved good decision making, in my opinion. Saying that I loved the house when I was a child is not a strong, defensible argument. And I think that the taxpayers of the city of Peterborough deserve council members who can make a strong, defensible argument. We've heard a number of them here tonight. So, last week's report, I came up with 3 things that I looked at, 3 reasons that I voted the way I did. And I know that I'm going to get shouted down for this, but one was housing, one was infrastructure, and one was property taxes. Those are the 3 things I took into consideration. The first one obviously is housing, and I understand there's no plan yet. I understand about the development, I understand that, but we are in a critical housing deficit. As well, any development charges that we could glean from that property if it was built, if there was a development on that site. The development charges that we would glean would go towards our $150 million infrastructure deficit that we have in the city with no way to pay for. This would go towards that. This would help that. As well, any property taxes that we would glean off that property would be multiplied based on what it would be if it was a heritage property. And every single one of us, I know I get phone calls every day telling me we need to reduce the budget. And property taxes are one way of doing that. And getting property taxes from that property would certainly help. I love that house. I have loved that house since I was a child, and it sickens me that I even need to make this vote, that a large, beautiful, empty house that has been empty for years, that has been allowed to crumble inside based on the crime against nature that the previous owners have committed against it. It tears me apart, and it breaks my heart to have to vote this way. But I hope that people understand the way that I am voting. I feel there's far more good that could be done by withdrawing the heritage designation than keeping it on. And I know that it may come as little solace to everyone, but be assured that I make it with a heavy heart, and it breaks my heart to have to make it, but I'm doing it because I have to fight for the city of Peterborough, and I have to do what I think is best for the residents of the city of Peterborough, not just for one small house. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Go. Just to let you know, we're on the speakers list. Councillor LaChica is next, then Councillor Rial, then Councillor Duguay, then Councillor Vasiliadis. Councillor LaChica, please.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I just want to say how much I appreciated some of the delegations tonight and the things that you raised, particularly Aaron at the end. Thank you for, as someone who lives right across the street, and an appreciation for the neighborhood that you expressed. It really resonated, and an acknowledgement of the work that went into the report that our expert city staff put together initially. Thank you for pointing that out. William Lee lived in 1400 Monaghan Road for quite some time. In fact, he lived in it for many years up until the 90s. And I'd like to read something he says about this house. This house was built like a fortress. The main floor of the house has a slate base so that if there were ever a fire in the basement, it couldn't reach into the main house until everyone was out. The roof alone has enough wood to build another house. I'm sure that any structural engineer can confirm that the house is extremely sound. It's a gorgeous landmark and would have a much better use than a multi-family housing and even suggest perhaps a museum. This is written really recently by William Lee, who is a former owner of the house. And I found that really interesting because, and I appreciate, thank you, Councillor Crowley, for your comments that you made, and about the emotional attachment. It isn't just emotion. It's facts and information that meet a heritage criteria that our director of heritage has so well put together for us. If we recall Merino, 17 Merino Road, the James Wallace homestead, it's just a Regency cottage. If it was on the docket today because a Toronto developer wished to oppose its designation or to demolish it, would this council vote to withdraw its resignation? Or how about the Burnham Mansion, Engleburn Farm in Ashburnham, that beautiful mansion that sits on a piece of property probably similar to the size of 1400 Monaghan Road? If there were a developer lobbying to demolish that and withdraw its heritage listing, would we be voting on that today to withdraw it? Thankfully, councils voted to retain the historic designation that PACAC and experts who are licensed and have the expertise to share with councils voted to preserve those properties. We're going down a dangerous road, I believe, if we don't have a sound and consistent process of designating the properties that deserve it. This has been listed for a long time. And just because we haven't gotten to designating it until September doesn't mean that it's the fault of the house. This house is special. We've heard neighbors and community and doctors. We've had 2 letters from groups of doctors who live in the area write us today. The concerned physicians of Peterborough's Old West End. There must have been close to 20 plus doctors who wrote this letter together. And a couple of things they said. The decision to reverse the September vote to designate this property undermines the values of our community and sets a concerning precedent for the treatment of other heritage properties going forward. We understand the city's need to address housing shortages. It's not a conflated issue. I believe more than anything in our housing crisis and building housing of all sorts. But let's use the vacant land that is out there and available to us without us having to demolish a home. We can build more housing on this lot if it's done with the city guidance as a designated property. So doctors are saying there are numerous underutilized sites across Peterborough that could support the kind of developments that Councillor Crowley's talking about without sacrificing our historical landmarks. We need to be like cities like Kingston and Hamilton who have a process.
Councillor Chika, do you want to use your second 5 right
No,
now?
I won't. Thank
You're-
you very much. We should be keeping this designation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Riel, please.
The chair, why would city council change how they do business with developers? They buy property, they get their zoning, and they either sell or sit on it. Point in fact, the property at the corner of Murray and Water Street, once the home of the historic St. Paul's Presbyterian Church, razed to the ground and since vacant for years. Or how about the corner of Park and Lansdowne Street, once the former home of Canadian Malter Ovaltine, razed and left vacant? What about the lot at the corner of Simcoe and Elmer Street, once the home of Baskin Robbins, razed and left vacant? And the list goes on. Promises made, promises not kept. Why change how we do business with developers at 1400 Monaghan Road? Let's raise the heritage home on the site to leave a vacant eyesore in the middle of a prominent neighborhood. Promises made, promises not kept, all in the name of development.
Councillor Duguay, please.
Thank you, Mayor Leo. I have a question of Mr. Hanson, if I might. Um, uh, Thank you, Mayor Leo, and then I'll provide some commentary. Eric, can you advise council if ERA, were they the firm that the city retained to do the Avenues Neighborhood Heritage Designation Study?
Mr. Hanson, please.
Mr. Chair, yes, they were.
Okay, thank you. So, I might say that in there are instances in which professionals, their opinions may be at odds with each other. In one vein, previously, in our Avenue area, we used the same consultant that the property owner, Cooper, is using for the 1400 Monaghan Road, and we agreed with their recommendations. We have a report prepared of which the same consultant has arrived at it differs from staff, and that happens. Now, I also wanted to draw to council's attention. There have been moments in our council chambers where, in the past, where properties that may have had some heritage value or significance either have redeveloped or have not redeveloped. And we place some confidence in the marketplace. And I'll shine it. This is an example. It may seem contradictory to how I would be voting, but I do recall that there was at the time, with respect to Mr. Kiley's law office on Elmer and Dalhousie Street, the notion that the building needed to be designated. The building's not designated. And there was faith with Mr. Kiley and his ownership and careful ownership. We ended up with a product that he was able to continue to use the house, convert it to an office space. So I only highlight that for my colleagues' benefits. There are times where we've not had to rely on designation and a product has worked. We've also had properties that may have had some heritage attributes and qualities where they have been completely redeveloped, and not all stay vacant and underutilized. So I think it's important for us to know, Your Worship and my colleagues, and also to echo Councillor Lachika's comments to the delegates and delegations here this evening. It's not easy to address council on such a passionate, important matter to your neighborhood. I completely understand, But, Your Worship, I might then, in summary, the fundamental question is if this building, this property is worthy of designation, putting aside all the other matters that have been discussed here and contentiously, but still discussed, it remains my opinion, and I have considered both the PACAC report and Mr. Hanson's report and that of the ERA consultants. And I've arrived at an opinion and a decision that this is a property and this building is not worthy of designation. And that we need to also appreciate that over time and through, unfortunately, a sustained practice of negligence, the property from the inside out is rotting. And it's going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for a property owner to effectively restore this building. And I fully appreciate we're not designating the interior. That's not me. That we're not necessarily designating the interior, but the interior of a building speaks to and has a correlation with the exterior, plain and simple. The interior doesn't work, the guts don't work, the exterior has a very difficult time being sustained. But finally, Your Worship, I mean, my vote has been consistent. This is not a property. I think there are other properties. Excuse me. I'm confident there are other properties in our community that have greater heritage and architectural value and significance to our community. And for the record, I have not met with the developer. I have not gone in the property, and I think it's important that I made at the very beginning of the process, decision to receive information from all angles and all perspectives, but I have chosen not to meet with the developer. I wanted to clarify that for the record. Those are my comments for the time being. Thank you, Your
Councillor
Worship.
Duguay. Councillor Vasiliadis, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask a question through you to Mr. Freeman, if possible. And a lot of numbers have been thrown around, and I'm curious to know what the actual increase in property taxes would be on a property like that, with all the speculation of how big the building will be, with the 50 some odd units. Could you give us a real number, if possible? I think we had the same problem.
Here we go. Thank you, Your Worship. The speakers, the councillors asked for the increase. I'm not sure that I am could provide the specific number of the taxes presently on the home. I could give some idea in terms of the based upon the comments that have been made, what the taxes may look like should the property be redeveloped. Looking at some similar sized properties in the 5 or 6 stories, 50, 55 units thereabouts, probably in the range of about 90,000 a year is not unreasonable. So assuming the assessed value is somewhere in the range of about $100,000 per unit, and then multiplying by the current rate, to give some idea, Your Worship.
No, thank you, and thank you very much. If you're going to try to sell an idea, I think the proper numbers are important. 90,000 is a lot different between $250,000, $300,000. So when I'm looking at numbers, that's a huge difference in the amount of money when you're looking at it. And I know we've been talking numbers here. So if we're working on numbers, it's really important to use the proper numbers, I feel. And so that, because I did see that in an email a month ago or two. That's why the numbers that have been thrown around aren't really accurate. And I can't think of a better person to give us the proper number than Mr. Freeman. So I certainly wanted to bring that out. And I would like to ask another question, if I may, through you to Mr. Hanson. I'd like to know why this property wasn't designated years ago. I know it's been on the list for a long time, and I'll just, if you could answer that, please.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The Heritage Register exists not as a list of all properties to be designated as we get to them. The point of listing on the Heritage Register is to keep an eye on properties with the understanding that if an owner wants to seek a demolition permit, they are required to give the city 60 days notice of their intention to seek that permit. That's enough time for the Heritage Committee to review a staff report with a recommendation about whether or not the building should be protected and get it to council for its decision. It doesn't mean that we have 750 buildings that we're going to designate. It means we've got 750 buildings that we want to keep an eye on so that we can keep council in the driver's seat when it comes to making a decision about whether a building which has cultural heritage value or interest under the Heritage Act should be protected by the community.
Thank you. No, and using that in the past, I know the Pig's Ear has been mentioned, the Ovaltine factory, and we've been through this process before, and it hasn't been overly successful. So I'm wondering if we should be looking at a different process somehow, and instead of it's been used as hostile designation or as a designation as we go. It really hasn't worked well overall in the past history of since I've been in council. It's interesting, and I appreciate everyone who spoke tonight, and all the councillors, of course, and my ward mate. We'll change the character of that neighborhood undoubtedly if that house is torn down or demolished. Everything's speculation on the development. It's amazing how a development starts and how it ends. It's sometimes two different things. So we can only speculate on how grand and great this development will be. To me, it'll be just another development in the community, and if that happens, I personally want to see the heritage designation. I think that you go through neighborhoods in certain communities, and and certain houses have that wow factor, and this house has that wow factor. So it's not based on that though, only other than real numbers haven't been really given out. Speculation on how great everything will be after. To me, that's not the best case that you can make to actually not make this designation. So no, I'll stick with my vote that I've had in the past with designating this. And I thank you everyone for listening, and I appreciate everyone who spoke tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Basiliadis. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. Been an interesting couple of weeks around the council table, and there have been emails going back and forth and a couple of phone calls and things like that on a whole variety of issues, just not the designation. I think it was Mr. Harris that tweaked a couple of things that I was wanting to ask him, but you might have been able to give me an opinion. But I'm going to go to Mr. Hanson here, if I could, through you, Your Worship. Eric, I've read your report. I've read the letter from Mr. Hamilton. I've heard delegations to council. Succinctly as you can, why is the Martin House worthy of council's consideration for designation, in your professional opinion?
Through Your Worship. There are 9 criteria under the Ontario Heritage Act for determining cultural heritage value or interest of a property. A property only needs to meet one of the 9. Our research, from which I drew the conclusions that I provided to PACAC and to council, were that the house meets criteria for probably 5 or 6 of those. I don't have the brief in front of me, but the association with a person of some renown to the community, and I think one very important thing is that properties can be designated for their local, provincial, or national value. We don't have to find a provincial or national significance to designate a building under the Provincial Ontario Heritage Act. In this case, I think this building has merit because of its local connections to people of prominence, both Martin and the contractor. It has a value for its design. It has value for its context in the neighborhood in terms of being one of a number of properties of affluent sort of people in Peterborough in the early part of the 20th century. So it meets a number of criteria. It only needs to meet one, but we believe at least the local level, it meets multiple criteria. And that was the reason for our recommendations to the Heritage Committee and Council.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hanson, and through you, Mr. Chair. Eric, is there another house in Peterborough like the Martin House?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. I don't think I could categorically state whether there is or isn't. I mean, we have a number of large properties built by affluent industrialists and business owners over the years. Whether a property is unique because of those associations, I don't know whether I'd say there is or isn't. I'd have to do a lot more research. Certainly a couple of large properties like the Pines, Martha Kidd's old house over in East City was mentioned. But I think you've got to be careful if you say we've designated one major lovely building, residential building. We don't have to do others because buildings can have multiple contexts and multiple significance that vary from building to building.
Fair enough. Having lived in Peterborough for 69 years, almost 70, I would venture, and I'm not a historian and I'm not an archivist, I haven't seen a house with a property like that anywhere in the city. I think it is unique. And for that reason alone, I think it deserves council's consideration for designation. Just a couple other questions, if I could, Mr. Chair. it's interesting, the commentary and the points of order around the council table tonight. There were a lot of objections about speakers, delegations. We're talking about designation and development. And that's really what I'm hearing around the table from councillors. We're not talking specifically, Your Worship, about designation because they're tied to a prospective developer who wants to take a single family home and potentially turn that into a multi-residential development. And that's different than I think most designations. There are some like the Y Lofts that was a larger facility that turned into multi-residential. So, you know, against all the objections around the table, most of us who are speaking are kind of linking those two things together because they are linked together on this particular property. And I think and I think some frustration from the people who were speaking tonight about that very thing. You're asked to thread a needle with respect to designation without considering development. And in this particular property, I would suggest, Your Worship, that they are intricately linked. I don't know how you get around that. So I just want to put that out there. Mr. Hanson.
You got a couple seconds left, Councillor Baldwin.
Put me back in the list, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Burke for a second time.
Thank you, Mayor Leal. And, you know, through you, let's not dispute the facts of what we're talking about here. We have 3 inexperienced developers from out of town that object to all of what we've heard so passionately from the neighborhood, people that have lived here their whole lives, that have an attachment not only to the history of the site, but to the story behind it. And, you know, I have no shame in showing up to this role every week and wearing my heart on my sleeve and making decisions from that place, because that's our role to do that. We are the connection between the community's response, which we heard so eloquently put to us tonight, and some of these decisions that we have to make. And, you know, people are not going to feel the impact of whatever tax benefit we get from any potential development. They're not going to feel that on our term. But you know what they are going to see? They're going to drive by there, just like it was mentioned tonight, the experience of people driving by that corner and having a relationship to it. It was mentioned tonight. And that relationship is going to be gone. That relationship is going to be gone, and it's going to be gone forever. People are going to be driving by emptiness, a construction site. The trees will be gone. The building will be gone. And we are put in this position as councillors who are elected to do this role to make these hard decisions. And I don't back down from making the decisions from a place of coming from my heart and for coming from my experience and connecting to the speakers that have the courage to come up and tell us how meaningful that property is to their history and their life and their future, you know? And the idea to make this about some tax thing, this is a more dynamic decision than that. We have heard our whole term about the lack of doctors in this community, and we get evidence today from a laundry list of doctors saying this is the reason, these are the reasons why we choose to live here and why people are coming here. And yet we're going to, in the face of that evidence, not listen to them and say, no, we know better. Something's good going to come. We're going to make some taxes off this, maybe. So I'm voting with my heart tonight. I am voting with the neighborhood that elected me. I am voting with the history of what makes Peterborough unique. And that's what we're talking about tonight. And you know what? You don't come back from that. And people will not forget this decision. I'm telling you, people will not forget this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Just to let you know where you're on the list, I have Councillor Crowley next for a second time, then Councillor Chico for a second time, Councillor Riel for a second time, then Councillor Beamer, then Councillor Baldwin for a second time. Councillor Crowley, your second time.
Thank you, Worship. Where to begin? Mr. Hanson, one of the other speakers, and I don't know who it was, mentioned that we have 450 properties. I think that was that the number, 750 properties on the heritage list.
Mr. Hanson, please.
Through your worship, there's the Heritage Register is made up of designated and listed properties. We have about 750 listed properties
Right.
and about 500 designated properties.
And someone had mentioned that there's other communities that are far ahead of us in terms of designating heritage properties. And I'm not entirely sure of the process of the way that the Heritage Registry works and how we designate properties. Do we sit back and wait for somebody to come and buy a property and then designate it if they want to do something to it? Or are we actively pushing more heritage properties, or should we be pushing more heritage properties?
Mr. Hanson, please.
Through your worship, we are pushing as many forward as we can. We've had a number of staffing challenges over the last year and a half in the Heritage Preservation Office. We are stabilizing that. We're in the process of hiring a heritage researcher, a part-time researcher that will be dedicated to writing designations to come forward for council's consideration.
Okay. And how many should we be designating a year? I mean, how many should be coming through to us?
Well,
Mr. Hanson, please.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Sorry.
Through you, Your Worship, that's a difficult question because partly we're in an artificial position right now because of legislation passed by the provincial government that is sunsetting the concept of listing properties. So like many other municipalities, we're suddenly looking at our heritage register, as I explained earlier, a document not meant to be a to-do list, but to be a watch list. And now we're in a position of designate or lose the any protection whatsoever.
Right.
So like most municipalities, we've got until about 18 months now to bring forward as many properties as we can for council's consideration. The Heritage Committee a couple of meetings ago prioritized 50 properties that it wants to bring forward as staff time allows. And we're hopeful that we could see 50 of those 50 come before council for its consideration by the end of the sunset of the listing of registered properties.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hanson. Just one more thing, if I may add. I know just to hop on to what Councillor Duguay was mentioning. I know that it has been mentioned that some of us have maybe had meetings with the owners of 1400 Monaghan. I just want to say that Thursday of last week was the first time that I'd reached out and talked to them. And it was when I actually did, as Mr. Harris noted from my social media post, that I had actually was able to get inside and view the property for myself. That was the first time that I had spoken to the developers, first time I had met with them. So it was well after I had voted 3 other times on the matter. So thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Through you, Your Worship. Appreciating hearing Eric Hansen speak to us tonight. And I, in my second time speaking, I wanted to direct my questions to him related to the letter of objection. And we haven't spoken too much about that. And I wanted to, acknowledge what previous councillor spoke to about ERA. Which consulted on something entirely different, which was the Avenues Heritage District. When I read their letter of objection, I found that on the whole, it spoke to the typical nature of this home and that it didn't appear to be special, as a Spanish Greek revival style of architecture, that there is one on Gilmore and there's another one over here that might have some similar characteristics. I found that argument a bit thin. I also question whether the person from ERA who signed it was actually one of the ones that worked with you before. Could you please speak to the letter of objection and some of the things there that were critical of your report? Thank you very much.
Through Your Worship, I'm not sure that I could or should, because if council chooses to reverse its decision tonight and the notice of intention to designate stands, it's entirely possible the owner will object to the OLT. And it's at that point that an impartial review of both our designation report and ERA's rebuttal would be undertaken. I don't think it's appropriate for me to get into a he said, she said argument over whether that work is credible or not.
Thank you. And if I could just supplemental to that, do you think that the point raised that because the company ERA consulted, the architectural firm consulted around our avenues heritage designation, does that necessarily have any bearing on the nature of your report and any inconsistencies?
Through your worship, to be clear, my report or their report when you.
Well, the validity of their report. I'm not sure why it's raised, because to me it seems like that was one heritage consultation. This is an entirely different piece. Would you say that stands and there isn't anything that is problematic about that?
Through you, your worship, what I can say is that ERA Architects and Planners is a reputable firm. We chose them through an RFP process to create the Avenues Heritage District. They did a very good job. The partners are all professional members of the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. I don't think it would be appropriate to cast aspersions on them by suggesting that they are, because they did one well, they obviously have to do the other well, or vice versa. So they're a reputable firm. I think that's it. That ERA Architects is a reputable firm, and until somebody, objectively, critiques the work, I don't think we can suggest that they are or aren't capable of writing a rebuttal to a heritage designation report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanson. And just to hear from you once again, the internal state of a house, if it's had water damage and a drywall's been removed and it has a particular look, does that have any bearing on the criteria for a heritage designation?
Yeah. Through you, your worship, no, it doesn't. The condition of the building is not one of the criteria by which designation would be considered.
Thank you for that reminder.
Through the chair, I wasn't going to speak for the second time, but my two colleagues here twigged something for me to raise. Councillor Baldwin said it's hard to differentiate between heritage and development. And if you've been watching council when we've debated this, my objections have been that we need to talk about heritage, not development. And that's why the objections to the people came here. God love them for coming here, but we have a procedural bylaw that states what can be said and what can't be said. And that goes to my colleague on the other side of, we have a procedural bylaw of what we're talking about. We're talking about heritage, not a development. Councillor Duguay raised the point about the developers. I have met personally with the developers twice. Once they invited me to a meeting to show me a rendering of what their proposed development was going to be. And a architectural firm in the city of Peterborough, Unity, was the one that they chose to do the renderings. And I told them at that time, my decision is on the heritage of the home, not your development. A week ago, a little over a week, I had a second meeting with the people, again, to tell me what their plans were for their development, and they could change them a bit. And they offered me affordable housing at 10% below market rent. If you've got $2,000 or $3,000 in your pocket, you might get a room at the end. But I told them again, my job is to make a decision on the heritage designation of this building. Two entities. Mr. Hanson, well respected in his field, made a heritage designation. APRAC, that all of you on council put our people, our community members on that committee to do a job for us. Their job is to find and rule on heritage designation of buildings. That's exactly what they did. They looked at 1400 Monaghan Road and said, we feel, along with Mr. Hanson, this home deserves designation. And all the time, all the way along, I have been looking at designation, and that's how I voted. Not what if, or if somebody's going to develop. There is no plan downstairs in planning. Why can't you get that through your head? It is, does this house warrant to be a heritage designation? That's what I voted on. That's what I will continue to vote on, not what ifs, or if this place is going to be going to be developed. That comes, and like Mr. Hanson said, if we rule that this home should be designated, they have a route to go. Let it go to the route. Let LPAT decide if this warrants designation. You have a job here right now to look at the report that came to you. It came to all of us. Read through it. And if you, in your hearts of heart, think that house should be designated, that's exactly how you should vote. That's how I voted. That's how I will continue to vote. This house should be designated heritage. Not if there's going to be a 10 or a 6-story or townhouses or whatever. That's all a myth. That's in the future of what could happen. Let's look at what's happening right here today, a heritage designation. That's my job. And I will continue to do that at this house that I believe should have heritage designation.
Thank you very much, Mayor Leal. Mayor Leal, I appreciate Councillor Baldwin's comments, and I agree with Councillor Baldwin. I think this is designated. The designation is tied with potential development, and that's why last week I let councillors around this table speak on development, because I think they are tied, they are linked. We had a challenge of the chair this evening, and an 8-3 vote, 8 councillors, the majority agreed that this is linked with potential development. We had 4 of the 10 delegates tonight come and speak on development, supporting housing. So I agree with Councillor Baldwin. I think this designation is indeed tied with potential development. Mayor Leal, I believe there are benefits that this proposed development will bring the community. Councillor Crowley alluded to it. This community right now is facing many challenges. We're facing a housing crisis, an infrastructure crisis, and a budget crisis. This development will provide the community desperately needed housing. We've heard that for weeks and months and years on end. Housing, housing, housing. This will provide us housing. This development will provide the community development charges, millions of dollars that will go to roads and infrastructure. This development will provide new tax revenue that will help with our budget crisis in future years. In Mayor Leal, this development will provide community jobs. To me, we are moving the community forward. Do we want to continue to have a vacant property that's in disrepair, that just sits on a corner as it has for the past 5 or 6 years? Or do we want new housing development that's going to move the city forward, that will assist with the housing crisis, the infrastructure crisis, and the budget crisis? Mayor Leal, I have not met with the developer, and my colleagues who have, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I just haven't. But I can tell you who I have met with over the past weeks and months is that's a lot of residents in downtown Ward, particularly around the Trinity issue, but we'll deal with that another time. And also many residents in Northcrest Ward. And what they're talking to me about is the high taxes that we need to get down. Many people are struggling out there, and we need to do everything we can to get those tax rates down, including approving new development. They're talking about the housing crisis and the need for housing units, and they're talking about roads. And that's where additional development charges will be beneficial. So, Mayor Leal, to me, this is moving forward. We're moving forward with housing, with jobs, with additional revenue, and with development charges that will assist in our infrastructure. So I will be supporting the motion in front of us. Thank you, Mayor Leal.
Thank you, Councillor Beamer. Councillor Baldwin for a second time.
Another 5 minutes, your worship?
Another 5 minutes, sir.
All right. So I'll go back to Mr. Hanson through you, your worship. Eric, if council designates 1400 Monaghan Road and a designation is put on there, that doesn't negate future development, does it?
Mr. Hanson, please.
Through you, your worship, no, it certainly does not. And I can actually tell you that the developer has actually undertaken a severance of a heritage property and created new building lots while protecting and restoring the original heritage building. So he does have some track record in the town, in Peterborough, for doing this kind of work.
Okay, thank you for that. Your worship, through you to Mr. Appleby. Brad, again, we're looking at a large parcel of property. I've heard that there's a developer that might like to develop this property. I've heard from Mr. Hanson directly now that if council designates the property as designates it as having heritage value, it doesn't prohibit development on that particular parcel of land. The developer would be subject to site plan with the city. Would that be correct?
Mr. Hanson or Mr. Appleby, please.
Through your worship, if a development proposal came along that included 11 or more residential dwellings, then it would be subject to site plan approval.
And Mr. Appleby, through his worship, it was referenced tonight by someone, it might have been Councillor Burke, I can't remember now, about the large old trees that are there. As part of a potential development on that 1400 Monaghan Road parcel, would there be a stipulation within site plan where it would be an expectation that the large trees, if possible, be maintained?
Mr. Appleby, please.
Through your worship, if development were to go through site plan approval, that would typically be something that's looked at, sort of the condition of the trees that are there, opportunities to save them. I also note that those trees would be regulated under current tree bylaws as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So, your worship, you know, I voted to designate the house of having heritage value. I absolutely agree with everything Councillor Beamer said. This particular property is intrinsically linked to development. It has to be. You know, the developer or the person who purchased the home, I suspect, not to maintain the house, but to raise it and build another development of housing of some sort. Again, I haven't seen the plans. I haven't met with the developer. I was going to meet with the developer, but I had a sober second thought and said, no, I'm not going to do that. Again, to Councillor Beamer, it's nothing wrong with meeting the developer. I decided I wasn't going to do that. But I do believe that the property is unique to the city of Peterborough. I have the utmost respect of Mr. Hanson and his staff and the staff that he had working on this before. And I think it should be designated as a heritage property and allow the process to continue. If the developer who has registered his letter of objection has done so, let the process continue. And that way, a decision will be made and the developer can then work with our professional staff, our professional planners, to get the best possible project for the citizens of Peterborough, which might include keeping that house on the property in some way. I think I heard Mr. Hamilton talk about perhaps adding on to the existing house, Martin House. And so you keep the shell and you develop and you continue to keep that very unique property that's there. So your worship, I've talked enough. I don't usually talk 10 minutes, but I'm going to suggest that we should designate the property, and that's how I'll be voting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Duguay for a second time.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Commissioner Potts and perhaps Mr. Appleby. If council were this evening to decide and to uphold the designation, Mr. Potts, the property owner would have the right to appeal that decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal, correct?
Your Worship, what's before council this evening, under the newer process under the Ontario Heritage Act, is the question about whether to withdraw the notice of intention to designate. So there are two outcomes. Council will either adopt the General Committee's recommendation and withdraw the notice of intention to designate, in which case it comes to an end. Or if that's defeated, then the notice of intention to designate will continue to stand. But still, there would be presumably at a future meeting, but within the 90-day, I think it's 90-day period following October 31st, council would have to pass the designation bylaw if council were intending to follow through with designation. Actual designation is not happening this evening. It's just about whether to withdraw the notice of intention to designate that has already happened. And that is what the General Committee determined, and that's the motion that's on the floor currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps, Your Worship, I worded my question incorrectly. If council were ultimately to decide or recommend a designation, is the property in a position they could appeal that designation decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal?
Your Worship, yes, that would be the owner's right.
And if I might continue, Your Worship, if the owner were elect to do same, would the city be putting itself in a position they would have to defend thus the recommendation at the tribunal?
In that hypothetical circumstance, if council were to intend to designate, and that would be consistent with the staff report, so the planets would align if that were to be council's decision. And yes, the city would be in a position to defend such a decision. Whether it ends up being successful or not is another question. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Commissioner Potts, for that query. And then I have then since we're on the subject of development, which I was loath to bring up, but I'm going to. Mr. Appleby, in the event the property owner were to formalize and proceed with a land use approval application, it will be subject to the rigors and statute requirements of the Planning Act, correct?
Through Your Worship, yes, it would.
And that would involve neighborhood input and ultimately decision if it is rezoning. The decision would rest here with this council, correct?
Your Worship, that's correct.
So, Your Worship, what has really fundamentally troubled me is that this council and these chambers approved a 6-story apartment building on Monaghan Road not long ago, albeit an affordable house project. It's not a property that necessarily was flagged, the property, the former building, for having some heritage attribute, but the characteristics are somewhat similar. The property backs onto residential homes. It's located on the same road. It's located across the street from a school. A 6-story building that is in keeping with the policy directives of our own city-approved official plan. And while there's not yet an application, I fully acknowledge that. But there is a real possibility there will be an application for a similar development. And I'm really struggling why, and I know we have heard from the neighbors and it's written in their public submissions to council. Many of the emails we receive speak to they're opposed to development. They're opposed to development. And what we're faced with here this evening, I agree with Councillor Baldwin. These two matters are linked. We can't separate them. We cannot separate them. And I suspect the keen interest in having the property designated from the neighborhood perspective is to potentially impede a comprehensive redevelopment of the property. But I must remind my colleagues we approved a development, 6-story multiple unit housing project on the same road, backing onto residential properties across the street from a school. The same concerns that have been expressed by some of the respondents to this matter. And I'm just, this isn't an apple and an apple. The only difference, 1400 Monaghan Road was identified as having heritage potential. Lastly, Your Worship, the firm that carried out the heritage evaluation, essentially a peer review of the PACAC report, Mr. Hansen's report, are deeply familiar with our community. That's the reason I ask. If this was a firm that had an office in Calgary and did a desktop review, it's very different. But they are actively familiar with and conversant with our community and this neighborhood. So, Your Worship, as much as I didn't want to raise the subject, I think it's important that we have, as a council, approved another multi-unit residential development backing on in a residential community adjacent to a school. And we did that for the interest of achieving and supporting a form of housing in this community, a desperate form of housing needed in this community. At the same time, we have an opportunity, subject to the advancement of a land use approval application, to also introduce much needed housing, much needed extra taxation, much needed development charges on a road that's built and designated to accommodate such development. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Many good points made tonight around the table. I won't be supporting the designation. I haven't all along. I have done significant research on this. I've done my homework, took a look at the bigger picture of this whole thing, and true enough, it is intrinsically linked. And I also think it's very important about what we say around the table, because we do need to welcome new development and investment into our community. We need someone who's actually going to get shovels in the ground, get all the approvals, get shovels in the ground, invest in our community.
Privilege.
Investing.
Who is she talking about? Put the name out here right now. Who are you talking about? If you're talking about one councillor around here, I'm sorry, but she has just made a comment. I want an apology to all of council. I want enough of this foolishness.
Thank you. I will continue. Thank you very much. So we are expected to grow. The province does expect us to grow. That means we need new citizens. And in fact, during COVID, we welcomed a great number of new citizens from the GTA, from Toronto. They are good people, and they brought with them developers, professionals, people who are willing to invest and live and enjoy the quality of life in the city of Peterborough. And yes, it all does matter, and it is development charges. And these are, we do anticipate, based on what we've been told, that these are quality built, quality condos, units, townhouses as well on Homewood. And the assessed value, with all due respect, is not $100,000 per 55 units. The estimated assessment value is more in the neighborhood, on average, between the condos and the townhouses, in the neighborhood of $400,000. So if I may respectfully, through you, Your Worship, given that assumption, an estimate of a $400,000 assessed value times 55 units, what would that tax revenue be approximately, sir, if you don't mind?
Thank you, Your Worship, and absolutely to the councillor's point. I mean, I was giving what, a comparative assessed value property that exists in the city of Peterborough today. Of course, as council knows, it's not staff's role to assess a property, but if I'm doing the math on what the councillor has just said, that property at $400,000 per unit would return a taxation revenue in the neighborhood of about $360,000.
Thank you. I really appreciate that clarification. And of course, it all depends on what the final product is, right? The final planning approval. And furthermore, I really do not endorse hostile designations. It is just not the way to go. It's a very bad look for the entire city. We've tried it before with no success. And when somebody is willing to invest in jobs in your community only to, and actually ask those relevant questions before even buying the house, I don't appreciate that kind of conduct. And we have heard also, it's not just about the very, very unfortunate damage from the inside of the house, it's on the outside of the house as well. And that is relevant if you are the person who's putting your money in there and have to deal with it one way or the other. And I do firmly, Mayor Leo, think that this will enhance the neighborhood. While we're losing a house that we've all enjoyed looking at all of these years, the reality is it's not viable anymore. And we will and it has housed, unfortunately, somebody who was quite reckless. The previous owner was very reckless and disrespectful of the neighborhood. The new development, I'm sure, will be of such a quality that it will attract more wonderful neighbors to the neighborhood. Many of those very neighbors might actually move in themselves as they downsize. So I'm sticking with my original vote to not pursue the designation. I believe it is the right thing to do, looking at the big picture. Thank you.
Councillor Pradell, Councillor Hakey.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too am on the Councillor Baldwin bandwagon. They are connected. You can't deny it. I did meet with the developer, and what I told him is what I said 10 years ago when this came up at council, and I'll say it again. I do not believe in designating a property that the owner doesn't want. I don't care. Buy it and do what you want. But let's get to some numbers then. So I'll work off of I know what the current taxes are. They're $12,000 a year on the property. Even at $90,000, it's $78,000 that we didn't have yesterday. That's number one. Number two, Mr. Freeman, can you tell me what ballpark the development charges will be? We talked about development charges, but can you put a price tag on that?
Mr. Freeman, please.
Your worship, as council is well aware, they have just most recently passed a new development charge bylaw that would introduce new rates on January 1. Given the order of magnitude of the property and the development that is being contemplated here tonight, even if it was a residential C property at the lowest rate, it's going to return about 2.2 if it's a residential B, maybe $2.6 million in development charges. Now, there's two things that would offset that number. Of course, there would be a credit for the one unit that's on the property today, and that there would also be a credit for any affordable housing units that would be contemplated in the development, because those would be exempt by legislation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Of information.
Go ahead, Councillor Hakey. Yes, Councillor Burke.
I
Quickly.
just have a point of
Quickly, please.
information. Yeah, would there not be massive infrastructure required to make that the city would have to put out at a cost with a project like this in that area with Monaghan Road?
Yeah, that would be a question that would have to come up during the site plan process. Councillor Hakey, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So we've got potentially 78,000 plus in new tax money, and for me, I have to look at those. Councillor Beamer and I were co-chairs of finance, and this was all about money, and that's what it is. So we've got the 78,000. We have $2.2 million in potential development charges.
Councillor Burke, please. Everybody was respectful of you.
Excuse me, sorry.
Councillor Hakey has the floor.
But there are properties in this city that should have been designated and were not. And some of us were on council at the time. Restwell Pole Street, First Tavern in Peterborough. The city bought the land. The city tore the building down because they needed it for the corner. So let's be clear. We're not angels in this. 123 Crescent Street. I believe the builder of that home was the founder of Lakefield Arms. Never had a designation, still does not, to the best of my knowledge, have a designation on that property. So when we're speaking, and to Councillor Vassiliadis' point, when we're speaking about facts, let's talk about facts. Those are two relevant facts in here. So it's not like we haven't done this before. The other thing, and I was hesitant, Your Worship, to even put this out into the public, but I got a lot of people, we all got emails, and a lot of them said, it's going to look awful. I didn't ask, have you seen what it looks like? Because I know the answer, and that is they haven't. It's a building that with consultation, as Councillor Duguay says, with consultation with the neighborhood, it can fit in that neighborhood. The renderings I saw, I liked. So I was very clear with the developer right from the get-go. And I don't care if it was him, if it was somebody local, it wouldn't bother me who it was. I would not designate it for those reasons. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hanky. Mr. Clerk, do you want to read? It was moved by.
Your Worship, I may stand corrected. I think it was moved by Councillors Burke and Crowley.
Burke and Crowley. Okay. Okay. We've had the debate. We'll go to a vote. And it's carried. Mr. Clerk, please. Next item of business.
Thanks, Your Worship. We are on to agenda item number 12, which is in reference to the special general committee meeting from this evening. And I'll just we prepare that motion here. The motion that's recommended from General Committee this evening, Your Worship, is that Council approve the recommendation outlined in report CAO PC 24-004 dated December 9th, 2024 of the Chief Administrative Officer as follows. That Council directs staff to proceed as recommended in closed session report CAO PC 24-004 dated December 9, 2024 of the Chief Administrative Officer respecting the collective bargaining process.
Someone like to move that? Councillor Vasiliadis, Councillor Parnell, Councillor questions? We'll go to a vote. And that is carried. The next item is the approval bylaws. Sorry. And of course, we have an item that wasn't recommended from the General Committee last week, and that was dealing with the Peterborough Memorial Center naming rights. Bylaws? Yes. Bylaw 24-083 to bylaw BAS 24-097. Moved by Councillor Parnell, second Councillor Duguay. Comments or questions? We'll go to a vote. Okay. Okay. And that is carried. Other business, Councillor Baldwin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to let members of council know that I received a petition from a group of citizens on Manise Avenue. That's been forwarded to the clerk electronically. The nature of the petition, Your Worship, is to have Manise Avenue repaved and have a look at what can be done to fix the kind of the decrepit condition of that road. And the second part of the petition, Your Worship, was a request for staff to consider a reduction in speed limit from 50 kilometers per hour to 40 kilometers per hour. So I've sent that to the clerk. He has possession of that electronically.
Just for the record, Councillor Baldwin, I live on Manise Avenue. My wife and I did not, and I repeat, did not sign the petition.
Understood, Your Worship.
Thanks very much. Just wanted to make it clear. Just wanted to make it clear. The next item of business is I have to do a declaration regarding the 2025 operating and capital budget items pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, bracket, subsection 284-16 and subsection 7 of Ontario Regulations 530/22, Part 6, 1. I, Mayor Jeff Leo, have decided as follows. 1. To pursue under Section 7 bracket of Ontario Regulation 530-22, the City of Peterborough specific 2025 operating capital budget items as outlined in the Council meeting agenda package of December 9th, 2024. That decision respecting the approval of the specific budget items be delegated to Council. The authority delegated is pursuant to this decision is in effect on December 9th, 2024, and ceases to have effect on December 10th, 2024. That the Treasurer provide the Mayor with periodic updates on the 2025 draft budget in order that these discussions may inform the budget deliberations of January 20th, 2025, and that the proposed specific budget items be provided to each member of Council and to the clerk, and hereby make the proposed budget available to the public, and I have signed it. Next item is the confirmation bylaw, 24-098. Someone like to move it? Councillor Beamer, Councillor Vasiliadis. Comments or questions? We'll go to a vote. That is carried. Next item, everyone, happy holidays. Move the adjournment. Councillor Crowley, Councillor Purnell, we'll go to a vote. That's carried. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. We'll see everybody in the new year.